Chapter 149. Seeing that Zhong Xiaohua was so happy that she was a bit silly, Ouyang Yang smiled and said, "Yes, Zhong Xiaohua, my big brother has always been a man of his word. As long as you say it, he will definitely agree." Zhong Xiaohua looked at Ouyang Yang, then looked at Ouyang Peng and asked, "Then, I'll say it." Ouyang Peng nodded and said, "Say it, I will definitely agree." Zhong Xiaohua asked without hesitation, "Then I'll have to ask Boss Ouyang to promise me one thing. Can you let my second brother, Zhong Xiaohua, enter the Misty School and become a disciple of the Misty School?" "Ah!" Ouyang Peng was very surprised. Ouyang Yang was also surprised. What? Everyone was also in an uproar. Bang! He Tianshu fell to the ground. Zhong Xiaohua saw Ouyang Peng's surprise and quickly explained, "My second brother's aptitude is very good. Although he's a bit old, he's really strong. He's now a bodyguard of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. In the past, he practiced the Six Harmonies Fist and was stronger than the other escort agencies. Now that he's learned internal strength, he's definitely stronger. Gang leader Ouyang, please do me a favor and accept my second brother." Ouyang Peng saw that Zhong Xiaohua was acting shamelessly and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He asked, "Have you never thought of entering the Misty School? You should think carefully. If I let your second brother become a disciple of the Misty School, you won't have this opportunity." Zhong Xiaohua still said without hesitation, "I've thought about it, but I think second brother is more suitable. Moreover, second brother is a bodyguard outside every day and his life is in danger at any time. It's not good if he doesn't have powerful martial arts. Therefore, although I really want to become a disciple of the Misty School, I'm still willing to give this opportunity to second brother." When Ouyang Peng heard this, his complexion changed a little. A strange look flashed in his eyes as he turned his head to look at Ouyang Yang. Ouyang Yang's face was also full of emotion and surprise. Wasn't this situation similar to what Ouyang Peng had said when he had become master's disciple? The only difference was that Ouyang Peng was replaced by the current Zhong Xiaohua and Ouyang Yang was replaced by the current Zhong Xiaohu. Ouyang Yang and Ouyang Peng looked at each other and exchanged glances. Ouyang Yang nodded. Ouyang Peng smiled and said to Zhong Xiaohua, "Since I've already said it, as long as your request isn't outrageous, I'll agree to it." "Chengyu, I'll agree to your request." Beside him, Zhong Chengyu hurriedly said, "Your disciple is here." Ouyang Peng ordered, "Send someone to call Zhong Xiaohu over." Chengyu turned around and left. Zhong Xiaohua saw this and let out a long sigh. Sect leader Ouyang was indeed a man of his word. Ouyang Peng saw this and said with a smile, "Zhong Xiaohua, don't worry. I said that I'll accept your second brother as a disciple of the Misty School, so I'll definitely do it. In a moment, when your second brother comes, I'll find him a master." Zhong Xiaohua was overjoyed and quickly saluted. "Many thanks for sect leader Ouyang's help." Ouyang Peng said apologetically, "I've already given this opportunity to your second brother, so I can't help you." Zhong Xiaohua smiled. "Thank you for your kindness, sect leader. I know that my aptitude is very poor. If I enter the Misty School, I'll just be a burden to you. I'm more suited to grow herbs." At this time, Ouyang Yang interrupted and said with a smile, "Zhong Xiaohua, since you gave this opportunity to your second brother, then I'll consider it as returning the favor of saving my life. However, do you still remember the promise I made to you before the moon?" When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, her eyes lit up and she said in disbelief, "Really? Big sister Ouyang, that still counts." In a hurry, she actually called Ouyang Yang big sister Ouyang Yang in the hall. It had to be said that Zhong Xiaohua was really overjoyed. Then, Ouyang Yang said to Ouyang Peng, "Big brother, do you still remember what I told you? I saw Zhong Xiaohua practicing martial arts very hard, so I promised to ask you to allow her to practice the internal strength cultivation method of the Misty School." You see, Ouyang Peng naturally knew about this matter. At that time, he didn't want to repay Zhong Xiaohua for saving his life, so he changed the promise to the Misty School. Now that Ouyang Yang mentioned it again, of course it was for the sake of the promise, but more importantly, it was to help Zhong Xiaohua. How could Ouyang Peng not know? He glanced at He Tianshu who was standing in the hall and rolled his eyes. He smiled and said, "Since Yang has this intention, then we might as well be a bit more generous. He turned his head and said to Zhong Xiaohua, since we made this promise, how about this? Zhong Xiaohua, today I'll be generous again. You go to the library and pick an internal strength cultivation method. I'll let a disciple teach it to you. How about that? A big meat pie was smashed right onto Zhong Xiaohua's head. Zhong Xiaohua was a bit dizzy from the hit. He stared blankly at Oyu Peng and foolishly asked again, is this real? Oyu Peng smiled and said, it's real, how could it not be real? Then he waved his hand and said to the eldest disciple Zhong Chengyu who had just returned, Chengyu, bring Zhong Xiaohua to the library and let him pick an internal strength cultivation method. Zhong Chengyu accepted the order and brought Zhong Xiaohua who was still doubting that he was still in a dream out. The library was very close to the meeting hall and it didn't take long for them to arrive at the door. Since the library was called library, it was naturally a building. Zhong Xiaohua followed Zhong Chengyu to this 3-story high and heavily guarded building. He looked at the black plaque with golden words hanging in front of the building and his heart was filled with emotions. The wish that he had yearned for day and night was about to come true. Zhong Chengyu looked at the extremely excited Zhong Xiaohua and kindly said, Zhong Xiaohua, this is the library. It is divided into 3 stories. The first story contains fist techniques, leg techniques, sword techniques, and internal strength cultivation methods that are popular in Jianghu. The second story contains things that are unique to our Misty School. The third story contains our Misty Schools and other top-secret martial arts manuals from Jianghu. Since the sect leader has allowed you to choose any internal strength cultivation method, he probably didn't limit you to the first or second story. You can go to the third story to take a look. However, I suggest that you choose from the second story. The martial arts on the third story can only be practiced by those with outstanding talent in Jianghu. I heard from Manor Head that your talent is limited. If you choose a top internal strength cultivation method, it will be difficult to learn and you will waste your time. Don't look at the cultivation methods on the third story either. The sect leader has instructed the disciples in the sect to teach you so that you can practice our Misty School's unique cultivation methods. This is also his love for you and I hope you don't disappoint him. Alright, I won't be going in. Once you're done choosing, just take out the ancient books. The ancient books here are all copied. You just need to take the ancient books and let the disciples at the entrance register them. Then, they will naturally replace the ancient books that you took. After he finished speaking, he stood at the door and motioned for Zhong Xiaohua to go in. Zhong Xiaohua looked at the library's door and then looked at Zhong Chengyu. She hesitantly said, then I'll go in. Zhong Chengyu looked at Zhong Xiaohua and smiled, saying, quickly go in. I'll wait for you here. Zhong Xiaohua also smiled and quickly ran in. Only Zhong Chengyu was left standing in front of the building with a smile. As soon as Zhong Xiaohua entered the library, she saw that behind the door was a small room. Inside, there was a rather old disciple sitting there with his head down. There was a table in front of him with a brush, ink, paper, inkstone, and other things on the table. He must be a registered disciple. Zhong Xiaohua slowed her footsteps. Seeing that he was ignoring her, she then quickly walked in. Zhong Xiaohua took a closer look and saw that the bookshelves were labeled with different labels such as fist arts, sword arts, neigong, etc. He walked to the bookshelves labeled with neigong and took a quick look. He could not help but gasp. There were thousands of books on the bookshelves, maybe even tens of thousands. Zhong Xiaohua sighed. He had gone through so much trouble to find these neigong manuals outside, but in the ethereal sect's library, these neigong manuals that were rarely seen outside were placed there like cabbages for people to choose from. Zhong Xiaohua could not help but want to take a look, but he immediately thought of Zhong Chengyue's words. These neigong manuals were just ordinary goods in the Jianghu. It was not easy for him to enter a treasure mountain, so how could he return empty-handed and pick up a piece of trash? Zhong Xiaohua could not help but want to take a look, but then he remembered Zhong Chengyue's words. These neigong manuals were just ordinary goods in the Jianghu. Thus, Zhong Xiaohua recomposed herself and looked around. She saw a wooden staircase beside a wall in the distance that led to the upper floor. Zhong Xiaohua looked straight ahead and walked through the dazzling collection of neigong books. She walked straight to the front of the stairs and walked up. When she reached the second floor, Zhong Xiaohua found that the hall was obviously much smaller than the first floor. The bookshelves were also much lower. However, the quality of the bookshelves was obviously much higher than the first floor. The Neigong books were also placed in a different way. They were all carefully placed flat. There was not a trace of dust on the bookshelves and Neigong books. It was obvious that they were often cleaned. There were still labels on the bookshelves. Zhong Xiaohua strolled and searched. Finally, she found the bookshelf with Neigong skills in the innermost part. This bookshelf was as tall as a person. It was divided into 3 floors, but it was very long. Looking carefully, there were thousands of Neigong skills used by the Misty School. In the face of such a treasure, Zhong Xiaohua also had a headache. Which one should she take? Zhong Xiaohua started reading the books carefully from one end of the bookshelf. He looked at the names one by one. Of course, he had never seen what an inner force cultivation method looked like. Naturally, he could only look at the names. In fact, this person was also right. If there was only one Neigong skill in front of Zhong Xiaohua, he certainly would not be picky. It did not matter if it was the Neigong skill of the Misty School or the Neigong skill of other gangs in Jianghu. As long as he could learn it, it was fine. Now that he had the opportunity to choose, he was naturally dazzled. Which one should he choose? He kept asking himself. Right now, he had lost his usual calmness. Luckily, his brain was enlightened by the Shuo Wenjie. After looking at thousands of Neigong skills, he only felt a little dizzy. Zhong Xiaohua, who could not make up his mind, was about to turn back and look again when he suddenly thought, what kind of mistake am I making? Any Neigong skill in Jianghu would be snatched by people who would break their heads to get it. Why am I being so picky? I'll just take any one. Immediately, he laughed self-deprecatingly and was about to pick up the book closest to him. But just as his hand touched the book, he saw the stairs to the 3rd floor from the corner of his eye. He could not help but have a thought. If the 2nd floor already contained the Neigong skills of the Misty School, then what would the top Neigong skills books in Jianghu be like on the 3rd floor? Curiosity killed the cat. With this thought in mind, Zhong Xiaohua could no longer control his footsteps and involuntarily followed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Needless to say, the 3rd floor was even smaller, and there were fewer bookshelves. Each bookshelf only had 1 layer, and there were different types of books on it. Some of them were made of ordinary paper, while others were made of fur. Zhong Xiaohua could not help but stare at them. There were not many books on the 3rd floor, so Zhong Xiaohua did not pay attention to the labels on the bookshelves. He looked at the names of the books one by one. The names of these martial arts, some were mysterious, some were ordinary. If they were placed in Jianghu, they would definitely cause a huge uproar. Unfortunately, the person watching was Zhong Xiaohua, so he could only play the lute to a cow. Zhong Xiaohua had his fill of looking at the books on the 3rd floor, but he also knew that none of these martial arts were suitable for him. Of course, he still remembered Zhong Xiaohua's words clearly. He was only looking at them to increase his experience. Greed was insatiable, like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Zhong Xiaohua remembered this illusion by heart. After he had his fill, he walked along the bookshelves. Suddenly, his eyes landed on the square table beside the bookshelves. There was a very ordinary small square box sitting quietly on the table. Zhong Xiaohua was stunned. What was this? He looked around and did not see any other similar boxes. Was it the Neigong skills inside? Or was it a sword manual? Zhong Xiaohua picked it up naturally. At this moment, in Pingyang City, Lotus Flower Escort Agency. When the crowd heard that a Misty School disciple had come to the escort agency to look for Zhong Xiaohu, they were all shocked. They all looked at Zhong Xiaohu, who was standing there in a daze. When the Misty School disciple in martial attire walked in front of Zhong Xiaohu, as if he had just woken up from a dream, he hurriedly bowed and said, "I am Zhong Xiaohu. May I know why you are here?" The Misty School disciple was cultured and refined. He smiled and said, "I don't know the details. I am only here on eldest senior brother's orders to invite you over. I heard that our sect leader OU is looking for you personally." When the confused Zhong Xiaohu heard this, he felt as if he had fallen into the clouds. He did not know who this eldest senior brother was, but how could he not know who sect leader OU was? This was a character that he could not even dream of. Why would he suddenly look for him? Seeing that the dumbstruck Zhong Xiaohu was still hesitating, Qiu Tong, who was standing in front, became anxious. She walked forward and said, Zhong Xiaohu, no matter what the matter is, since sect leader OU is looking for you, you had better hurry over. Won't you know everything once you get there? The Misty School disciple seemed to know Qiu Tong. He smiled and said, Sister Qiu Tong is right. Zhong Xiaohu, you had better hurry over with me. If you make sect leader wait anxiously, you and I will not be able to bear the consequences. As if he had just woken up from a dream, Zhong Xiaohu nodded his head like a chick pecking at rice. He followed the disciple and quickly walked out of the small courtyard. He swung the stirrups and mounted his horse, galloping away. When the two were far away, the crowd finally regained their senses. Fourth Master Wen smiled apologetically and said to Qiu Tong, Miss Qiu Tong, we have known each other for many years. This Lotus Flower Escort Agency and Huanxi Manor are one entity. What you did really put me in a difficult position. Qiu Tong smiled and said, Fourth Master need not feel guilty. Our Huanxi Manor has always dealt with matters and not people. Our young miss is indeed angry. I definitely cannot take back these 10 taels of silver. You can just watch and see. Our friendship is still the same. You don't need to think too much. After she finished speaking, she took her leave without saying another word. Fourth Master Wen looked at Qiu Tong's departing figure and was unable to chase after her. He could only stomp his feet and throw the 10 taels of silver to escort leader Luo. He scolded angrily, This is all your fault. Escort leader Luo, whose face had long turned pale from the torment of what he had seen and heard today, still agilely caught the silver. He said innocently, Fourth Master, I was just trying to increase income and reduce expenditure. Who knew that I would run into such a hard nail? Fourth Master Wen was so angry that his face turned green. He pointed at escort leader Luo and said, Do you think I don't know what you are thinking? Isn't it because Zhong Xiaohu is your assistant and does a better job than you? He is only an escort now. If he becomes an escort leader in the future, he will definitely threaten your position and development. Escort leader Luo blushed and said, Fourth Master, isn't this a sign of my competitive spirit? It is also the result of your nurturing. Bah! Fourth Master Wen spat a mouthful of phlegm on the ground and said, You still have the nerve to say that. All right, when Zhong Xiaohu returns, you'd better quickly apologize to him. If he can forgive you, then everything will be fine. If not, then do as you see fit. After he finished speaking, he no longer paid any attention to him and turned to return to his room. The remaining people watched the show end and also waved their sleeves and returned to their rooms. Only the main character, escort leader Luo, was left standing there with a red and blue face. No one knew what he was thinking. For the time being, Zhong Xiaohu followed the Misty Mountain Villa's disciples and rushed all the way to the Misty Mountain Villa's conference hall. Zhong Xiaohua in the library picked up the inconspicuous little box and wanted to open it. The box didn't open as he expected. Instead, it didn't move at all in his hand. Zhong Xiaohua increased his strength, but still couldn't open it. Thus, he changed his angle and used all his strength, but the box still lay quietly in his hand without any signs of opening. Zhong Xiaohua looked left and right and became angrier. He shouted in his heart, I just want to see what is inside. I just want to see the name. Why is it so difficult? Suddenly, as if he thought of something, he took out his beloved little sword and used the tip of the sword to pry at the center of the box. However, the box didn't seem to have any gaps. The tip of the sword actually slid on the box. No matter how hard Zhong Xiaohua tried to pry, it didn't have any effect. In the end, Zhong Xiaohua didn't have much patience to begin with. He swung his left arm and used all his strength to stab at the little box. This was also the reason why Zhong Xiaohua was diligent in practicing his sword moves. This simple movement unconsciously displayed one of the variations. The angle and speed were all shockingly consistent. Thus, a warm current instantly appeared from somewhere in his left arm and traveled up his left arm. When the little sword stabbed into the little box, the warm current also reached the little sword at the same time. A pop sound was heard. Zhong Xiaohua was shocked. This is bad. Why did I pierce this little box in a hurry? What should I do? I've caused a disaster. Chapter 150. He heard a soft pop sound, as if a needle had popped a bubble. Zhong Xiaohua suddenly woke up, sweating profusely. What happened to him? He lost his patience so easily and broke the small box. How was he going to explain to the Misty School? After he took a closer look at the box, he was finally able to relax. Zhong Xiaohua had not left a huge hole in the box. Instead, there was a gap in the middle of the box. The originally sealed box had turned into a small box with a lid. However, the texture was still normal, and he couldn't see anything special about it. Zhong Xiaohua put the small sword back into his pocket and calmed himself down. Then, he gently opened the lid. The lid opened easily without any trouble. When Zhong Xiaohua took a closer look, there was a small booklet in the box. He reached out and took the booklet out. On the sky blue cover, there were 4 big words, Carefree Heart Sutra. Zhong Xiaohua couldn't help but be stunned. This name was so familiar. After thinking for a bit, wasn't it the name of the inner strength mantra that he had seen in a corner of a book on the 2nd floor? Why was there another one here? Zhong Xiaohua couldn't help but feel angry. Curiosity killed the cat. Why did you put a book on the 3rd floor when there were already books on the 2nd floor? Even if you put it there, you didn't have to put it in such a strange box. It aroused his curiosity, and he almost poked a big hole in the small box. Zhong Xiaohua suppressed his curiosity and threw the booklet back into the box. Just as he was about to close the lid, Zhong Xiaohua heard a voice coming from behind him. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. Could it be that this small box was placed here for some special purpose? Since he had seen this Carefree Heart Sutra twice, and it was on the 2nd and 3rd floor, could it be that it was fated to be with him? Anyway, there were as many inner strength mantras downstairs. He didn't know which one to take, so he just used this to make up the numbers. Although Zhong Chengyu said that he would only allow him to use the cultivation method on the 2nd floor, this cultivation method was also available on the 2nd floor. He did not seem to have any intention of going against Zhong Chengyu's will. Zhong Xiaohua thought to herself. Her left hand involuntarily reached for the Carefree Heart Sutra. She put it in her bosom and closed the box. Then she looked around and was about to go downstairs when she changed her mind. The 3rd floor of the book collection pavilion was not a place where anyone could come. It was a pity that she did not know how to practice the mental cultivation method of internal strength. Otherwise, she could memorize a few secret manuals and go back. But even so, she had to satisfy her craving. Even if she could not understand the contents, she could at least read the names of the secret manuals again. Therefore, Zhong Xiaohua did what she thought. She walked around the bookshelf again and read the names of the secret manuals one by one. Finally, she reluctantly walked down the stairs to the 3rd floor. Poor Zhong Xiaohua felt a sense of loss, as if she had entered a mountain of treasures but returned empty-handed. There were so many secret manuals there, but she could not practice them. The only thing she could do was to memorize their names. How sad, how lamentable. Just as Zhong Xiaohua was belittling herself and sighing, the small box on the square table next to the bookshelf on the 3rd floor suddenly flashed with a colorful light. A colorless cover appeared from the corner of the box and slowly spread to every part of the box. Finally, it disappeared at the bottom of the box. Following that, the lid of the box also disappeared, and it returned to being an ordinary, small box with no gaps. If Zhong Xiaohua was beside him, her jaw would definitely drop to the ground and she would be unable to close her mouth. Unfortunately, this fellow was doing the shady business of waving his hand and not taking away a single piece of paper on the 2nd floor stairs. Carrying a dissatisfied mood, Zhong Xiaohua went down to the 1st floor. At this time, she no longer had the determination she had when she first came in. When she left the bookshelf, she looked back with some reluctance and secretly said, "How good would it be if I could read these books often? Ari, people's hearts can never be satisfied. There is no best, only better." When Zhong Xiaohua's feet moved to the entrance of the library, the old disciple who was looking down immediately opened his eyes. A glint flashed across his eyes as he stared sternly at Zhong Xiaohua and asked, "You have already chosen?" Zhong Xiaohua felt her hair stand on end from being stared at. She secretly said, "Not good. Could it be that he knows about me breaking open the box on the third floor?" Looking at that person's dead face, Zhong Xiaohua said uneasily, "Yes, I've chosen." That person still said coldly, "Take it out and let me register it." Zhong Xiaohua's heart relaxed. She reached out and took out the small booklet. At this time, that person asked again, "What secret book are you taking out?" Zhong Xiaohua casually said, "Carefree Heart Sutra." Carefree Heart Sutra. That person cried out in surprise. His face actually had a strange expression of disbelief. Zhong Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She asked, "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" That person immediately returned to his dead face and said, "Nothing, let me take a look." Zhong Xiaohua had already taken out the small booklet and handed it to that person. That person looked at the cover. On it was written Carefree Heart Sutra. Just as he was about to take it, he suddenly retracted his hand and waved his hand. He said, "All right, you're really lucky. You can go." Hearing this, Zhong Xiaohua happily said, "Is it really good luck?" "Haha, my luck has always been good." That person curled his lips and didn't say anything else. Zhong Xiaohua saw that that person's expression was still as calm as water. She could only retract her hand and put the small booklet back into her bosom. After bowing to him, she then left the library. That person waited for Zhong Xiaohua to leave before picking up a pen and writing on the paper in front of him. After that, he still sat down with his eyes down and his nose down. He secretly thought, "Sigh, this chi deviation is really annoying. If the meridians are blocked, then so be it. Why did it have to be blocked on the face? Even if I want to smile, it's difficult. I don't know when it will be better." Zhong Chengyu was still waiting at the door. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua come out, he smiled and said, "You've finally chosen?" Hearing the word finally, Zhong Xiaohua hurriedly said apologetically, "Zhong, that big brother, I'm really sorry for making you wait. To tell you the truth, I thought I'd just go up there and pick one book. I didn't expect there to be so many secret manuals. I was dazzled by the selection and that's why I was delayed." Although Zhong Chengyu was already impatient, hearing Zhong Xiaohua's words, he smiled knowingly and said, "Haha, that's understandable. Anyone would be dazzled when they go in." "That's right. What secret manual did you pick?" Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "The Carefree Heart Sutra. Do you want to take a look?" After saying this, she was about to take it out from her bosom. Hearing these 4 words, Zhong Chengyu was also stunned. The situation in front of him was very strange. He repeatedly waved his hand and said, "No need, no need. Let's hurry up and go. I'm sure the gang leader is waiting anxiously." Hearing Zhong Chengyu say this, Zhong Xiaohua's heart also trembled. Gang leader Ou was still sitting in the main hall. It was really inappropriate for her to be doing something like breaking open a box in the library pavilion. Her footsteps immediately quickened. When Zhong Xiaohua followed Zhong Chengyu back to the main hall, she discovered that they were discussing other matters. Ou Peng's expression was also normal. From time to time, he would laugh and talk with Ou Yang. How could he be waiting for her and be in an awkward silence? Moreover, what kind of person was gang leader Ou? He usually didn't show his happiness on his face. If he showed an impatient expression, that would be abnormal. When Ou Peng saw Zhong Chengyu and Zhong Xiaohua return, he smiled and said, "Zhong Xiaohua, what kind of internal cultivation method did you pick? Tell me about it. I'll have a disciple who cultivates this internal cultivation method give you some pointers." When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, she was overjoyed. Just as she was about to go up and answer, another disciple walked in and reported that Zhong Xiaohu had arrived and was waiting at the door of the main hall. When Ou Peng heard this, he nodded and said, "Let him come in." When Zhong Xiaohua heard that her second brother had arrived, she didn't say anything else. She quietly stood to the side and turned her head to look at the door, waiting for a familiar face to appear. Not long after, Zhong Xiaohu, who was wearing the uniform of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency's guards, quickly walked into the main hall. When Zhong Xiaohu walked into the main hall, he glanced around. Ignoring the others for the time being, the first thing he saw was Zhong Xiaohua standing in front of the hall. He suddenly realized that gang leader Ou must have called him over because of his younger brother. Although this was the first time that Zhong Xiaohu had come to the main hall, he had after all been a leader of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency for nearly a year and knew some of the rules. When he saw Ou Peng sitting on the only chair in the hall, he already knew. He didn't pay attention to Zhong Xiaohua and instead hurriedly walked forward and saluted Ou Peng. Greetings to gang leader Ou. This one is Zhong Xiaohu, a guard of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. When Ou Peng saw that Zhong Xiaohu was in high spirits and that he understood the rules, he was also happy. He smiled and said, "No need to be so polite. Zhong Xiaohu, I heard that you're doing quite well in the Lotus Flower Escort Agency." Zhong Xiaohu hurriedly said modestly, "It's nothing much. I'm just following the escort leader's instructions and doing some things that are part of my job. I wouldn't dare take credit for it." Ou Peng saw that Zhong Xiaohu's reply was cautious and didn't find it strange. He asked, "I presume that you still don't know why I called you here?" Zhong Xiaohu respectfully replied, "Yes, please enlighten me, gang leader Ou." Ou Peng pointed to Ou Yang who was sitting below him and said, "This is my younger sister and also the owner of Huanxi Mountain Villa." Zhong Xiaohu hurriedly saluted Ou Yang and said, "Greetings to Manor Lord Ou." Ou Yang smiled and returned the salute. Ou Peng continued, "Your younger brother Zhong Xiaohua risked his own life to save my younger sister. You can say that we owe your brother a favor. Just now, I agreed to Zhong Xiaohua's request and prepared to accept you as a disciple of the Misty School. I don't know if you're willing." When Zhong Xiaohu heard this, the expression on his face was very shocked. On his way here, he had thought of many possibilities, but he had never thought that Ou Peng would let him join the Misty School. This was something that he had never dreamed of even in his wildest dreams. However, he immediately shook his head and said, "Gang leader Ou, to be honest, I really hope to join the Misty School. This is something that I would never dream of, but this credit belongs to my younger brother. This opportunity should be given to him. Although his aptitude isn't good, he still knows how to work hard and put his heart into it. In terms of martial arts, he may have a bright future. And now that I'm in the Lotus Escort Agency, I can also learn martial arts and internal strength in the Martial Arts Center. I'm much stronger than Xiaohua. At the very least, Xiaohua still hasn't seen an internal strength cultivation method yet." Zhong Xiaohua was anxious when he heard this from behind. He walked forward and said, "Second brother, don't decline. It wasn't easy for me to get gang leader Ou to agree. You can't waste this opportunity." Zhong Xiaohu turned around and glared at him, saying, "Who told you not to tell me first? You risked your life for this opportunity, so how can second brother accept it? Your injuries haven't healed yet, but there may be a day when they'll be healed in the Misty School. Moreover, staying in the Misty School will allow you to practice the internal strength that you've been yearning for day and night. Second brother has his own plans for this matter." Zhong Xiaohua said, "But the business of an escort agency is very dangerous. With the martial arts of your martial arts center, it may not be able to guarantee your safety. Ayo, if something were to happen to you, how am I going to explain it to my parents back home?" Zhong Xiaohu smiled and said, "Xiaohua, I should be the one to say this to you." Zhong Xiaohua also smiled and said, "I was afraid that you would say it, so I said it first. I don't even come out of the Huanxi Mountain Villa, so what big matter could happen? It's better for you to join the Misty School." Ou Peng saw that the two of them were arguing, so he looked at Ou Yang and said to Zhong Xiaohu with a smile, "Zhong Xiaohu, you don't have to say anything to Zhong Xiaohua. I promised Zhong Xiaohua this matter, so what you say doesn't count. Moreover, I've already given Zhong Xiaohua other compensation, so you don't have to say anything more." Zhong Xiaohu saw that Ou Peng had spoken, so he didn't dare to say anything more. He glared fiercely at Zhong Xiaohua. Zhong Xiaohua stuck out her tongue and also didn't say anything. Ou Peng saw that Zhong Xiaohu didn't have any objections, so he pointed at He Tianshu. Just as he was about to instruct him, he suddenly remembered that He Tianshu was the master that he had appointed for Zhong Xiaohua. Both of them were in the Huanxi Mountain Villa, so it was very suitable for them to plant herbs together. However, it would be inappropriate for Zhong Xiaohu to acknowledge him as his master. However, since he had already agreed to let Zhong Xiaohu enter the Misty School, the rest was a small matter that he didn't need to worry about. Thus, he waved his hand and was about to call out to Zhong Xiaohu when someone beside him said, "Master, I'm willing to accept Zhong Xiaohu as my disciple." Oyu Peng was stunned. When he looked closely, it was Wen Wenhai who stepped out from the crowd. Oyu Peng felt strange and asked, "Hai, why did you suddenly want to accept Zhong Xiaohu as your disciple?" Wen Wenhai respectfully replied, "Last year, disciple and junior sister Shui went out to do some errands and happened to meet Zhong Xiaohu and Zhong Xiaohua's family. They were righteous and saved people. Now that I think about it, I have a lot of faith with him. Moreover, Zhong Xiaohu is loyal and righteous, so I want to accept him as my disciple." Oyu Peng suddenly understood. The matter of Wen Wenhai and Shui Qing saving people had been reported to him. Shui Qing had even left his token with them. Thinking about how Zhong Xiaohu and Shui Qing were able to save people before they learned martial arts, Oyu Peng couldn't help but look at Zhong Xiaohu in a new light. In his heart, he had already acquiesced. However, he was still worried and asked, "Hai, you haven't accepted a disciple yet. This Zhong Xiaohu is already very old and can't be compared to the children that we usually select in our sect. You have to be fully prepared." When Wenhai smiled and said, "Master, Zhong Xiaohu is a disciple. It doesn't matter who accepts him. If you force him to be someone else, he might not be happy. Zhong Xiaohu may not be able to learn anything under that person's tutelage. Perhaps there will be a barrier between them, which will delay their future. Disciple and Zhong Xiaohu are old acquaintances, so it can be considered fate. Even if his future in martial arts is bleak, at worst, I will treat him as a brother." Oyu Peng scolded, "What nonsense are you talking about? A disciple is a disciple. How can he be a brother?" When Wenhai said happily, "Disciple knows his mistake. Does this mean that master has agreed?" Oyu Peng smiled and said, "You accept a disciple yourself. It's a matter of mutual consent. Why should I interfere? Besides, Zhong Xiaohu may not be willing." When Zhong Xiaohu heard this, he was immediately enlightened. He knelt down in front of Wen Wenhai and said, "Disciple Zhong Xiaohu greets master." This bow was very unusual. It was obvious that if it was an ordinary disciple, He Tianshu would have accepted Zhong Xiaohu. Zhong Xiaohu was just an ordinary disciple who did not stand out. But who was Wen Wenhai? Ethereal Sect's sect master Oyu's personal disciple. Even though his martial arts were not high, his status was still there. Zhong Xiaohu had become his disciple, and his status had risen to the sky. He could also be considered Oyu Peng's direct disciple. Perhaps he would not be treated well in the future, but at least he would not be bullied by others. Even He Tianshu, who was at the back, was filled with admiration. Why is Zhong Xiaohu so lucky? Why didn't I encounter such a good thing when I entered the school? I really hope that I'm the one who is kowtowing now. When Wenhai saw Zhong Xiaohu kneel down, he didn't immediately help him up. Instead, he firmly accepted Zhong Xiaohu's 3 kowtows before allowing him to stand up. The people around also came over to congratulate Wen Wenhai for accepting a disciple. Oyu Peng smiled and said, "All right, this is the meeting hall. Everyone, please calm down. We'll make up for the apprenticeship ceremony later and officially let Zhong Xiaohu enter our Misty School." When everyone heard this, they said, "That's how it should be." Then they returned to their seats. When everyone was seated, Oyu Peng looked at Zhong Xiaohua again and asked gently, "Zhong Xiaohua, I don't think I know what internal strength cultivation method you took." Zhong Xiaohua smiled and took out the sky blue booklet from her chest. She said, "I picked the Carefree Heart Sutra. Do you want to take a look?" When he heard this, Oyu Peng made a sound of surprise. A strange expression appeared on his face. Not only that, but most of the people in the meeting hall also shut their mouths and stopped talking. They all had strange expressions on their faces. Oyu Peng looked at Zhong Xiaohua's outstretched hand and waved it. He said, "No need. There are so many internal strength cultivation methods in the Sutra Depository. I have to say that you're lucky to be able to pick this one. Sai, You choosing this internal strength cultivation method makes things difficult for me. None of the Misty School's disciples have practiced this Carefree Heart Sutra. Even if I wanted to find someone to give you some pointers, it would be very difficult. However, if you practice this internal strength cultivation method alone without someone to guide you, it would be very easy for you to go astray. Oh, right, I forgot that you might not be able to practice this Carefree Heart Sutra in the future. Chapter 151. Zhong Xiaohua was puzzled. She had already chosen the Carefree Heart Sutra, so why didn't she cultivate it? Could it be that he was afraid of her cultivation going berserk? Just as she was about to ask, she heard Oyu Peng continue, "You choosing this internal strength cultivation method is making things difficult for me. Ari, forget it." After he finished speaking, he beckoned Zhong Chengyu over and lowered his head to give him a few instructions. Zhong Chengyu's face was filled with astonishment as he listened. He couldn't help but glance at Zhong Xiaohua several times. After Oyu Peng finished giving his instructions, Zhong Chengyu hurriedly left. Oyu Peng continued, "Zhong Xiaohua, your second brother entered the Misty School and became a disciple. You also obtained the internal strength cultivation method. Our Misty School has always been clear about gratitude and grudges. Your kindness can be considered to have ended. Are you satisfied?" Zhong Xiaohua hurriedly stepped forward and respectfully saluted. "Sect leader Oyu's words are incorrect. We brothers have received such great kindness from you and are very grateful. Many thanks to sect leader Oyu for granting us our wish." Oyu Peng turned to look at Oyu Yang and said with a smile, "Yang, are you satisfied with this arrangement?" Oyu Yang chuckled and said, "Many thanks for big brother's good intentions. Little sister is very satisfied." Oyu Peng laughed and said, all right. We're family." Oyu Yang stood up and said, "Big brother, I've wasted so much of your time. I won't disturb your discussion of the sect's affairs any longer. Little sister will take her leave now." Oyu Peng said, "All right. Quickly go back and rest. In the future, take care of your body." Oyu Yang said, "I know, big brother." After she finished speaking, Oyu Yang called Zhong Xiaohua and He Tianshu, who had been watching the show for half a day, and together they left the meeting hall. Zhong Xiaohua looked at her second brother, who had deeply buried his joy and was looking at her with gratitude. She smiled and nodded. She patted her chest, indicating that she hadn't come out empty-handed. Only then did she follow behind He Tianshu, who seemed to have lost his soul, out of the meeting hall. The three of them had just passed through several courtyards and were about to enter the garden when they heard someone call out from behind, "Manor Lord Oyu, please wait." Oyu Yang and the others stopped when they heard the voice. When they turned around, they saw someone chasing after them from afar. When they got a closer look, they saw that it was Oyu Peng's eldest disciple, Zhong Chengyu. As they approached, Oyu Yang asked, "Chengyu, is there anything else your master needs?" Zhong Chengyu bowed and said, "Manor Lord, please wait for a moment. Master has something to give to Zhong Xiaohua." Hearing this, Oyu Yang and the others were puzzled. Zhong Chengyu saw that they didn't understand and didn't explain. He smiled and took out a few thin sheets of paper from his chest and solemnly handed them to Zhong Xiaohua. He said seriously, "Zhong Xiaohua, this is the first 3 levels of the ethereal steps cultivation technique that I obtained from the library under my master's orders. I'm giving it to you now. The first 3 levels of the ethereal steps cultivation technique doesn't have a high requirement for internal energy. I reckon that you will be able to cultivate it. However, you must remember that the ethereal steps cultivation technique, as well as the Carefree Heart Sutra, can only be cultivated by you. Without the consent of the Misty School, you cannot pass it on to anyone else. You also cannot lose this cultivation technique. Otherwise, my Misty School will punish you according to the severity of the case, or even abolish your martial arts." Zhong Xiaohua didn't understand and asked, "What kind of cultivation technique is this ethereal steps? Why are the requirements so high? I don't know any internal energy and have never learned any footwork techniques. How should I cultivate it?" When Zhong Chengyu heard this, he continued to smile and said, "Master has said that if you have any problems cultivating this ethereal steps, You can ask He Tianshu of the pharmacy hall. Then, he turned to He Tianshu and said, He Tianshu, you heard what I said to Zhong Xiaohua just now, right? He Tianshu nodded his head reflexively. This guy was still jealous of Zhong Xiaohu's luck and naturally didn't hear it clearly. However, he still said, I heard. Zhong Chengyu continued, what I said just now also applies to you. Do you understand? He Tianshu was still at a loss and said, all right, I understand. Before he finished speaking, He Tianshu suddenly came to a realization and was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed to Zhong Chengyu and said, He Tianshu of the pharmacy hall understands. May senior apprentice brother Zhong convey this disciple's gratitude to the Grand Sect Master for his grace. Zhong Chengyu nodded and said, I will definitely convey your gratitude. This is what you deserve. All right, Manor Lord, this disciple will take his leave. After he finished speaking, he bowed to Ouyang Yang and left. Zhong Xiaohua, who was at the side, saw He Tianshu's grateful appearance and couldn't understand. She tugged on his sleeve and pulled him back from looking at Zhong Chengyue's departing figure. The gratitude in his eyes didn't diminish and she asked in confusion, Team leader he has already gone far. Don't be so grateful. He can't see it. He Tianshu turned back. His heart was still surging and his eyes were wet. He said to Ouyang Yang, Manor Lord, I didn't protect you well last time and caused you to be injured. I thought that I was already being lenient by not being punished. But now, I have been bestowed with such an opportunity. This is something that I would never have dreamed of. Ouyang Yang smiled and comforted him. Your sect master has always been fair in his rewards and punishments. Your contribution in the ambush last time wasn't small. If it weren't for you, the situation would have been very different. Perhaps your sect master hasn't thought of how to reward you. Now that you have an opportunity, you can cultivate with Zhong Xiaohua. He Tianshu repeatedly said modestly, not daring to claim credit. Zhong Xiaohua was puzzled. She poked her head out and asked, Team leader what's so good about this footwork? Is it very powerful? How is it compared to the Carefree Heart Sutra? When He Tianshu heard this, he smacked Zhong Xiaohua's head and said sternly, one of the 3 divine techniques of the Misty School. Do you think it's powerful or not? I don't know how good your Carefree Heart Sutra is, but looking at the expressions and reactions of the people in the meeting hall, I reckon it's just a trash technique. When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, she was instantly discouraged. She said dejectedly, but, this is also a mental cultivation technique from the 2nd floor. It's better than those ordinary ones from the 1st floor. Of course, there was one more thing that he didn't dare to say. Moreover, this book was taken from the 3rd floor. He Tianshu said, if it was a good mental cultivation technique, would our sect master still need to ask eldest senior brother to give you this ethereal steps? Zhong Xiaohua suddenly understood what Ouyang Peng was talking about. Zhong Xiaohua said helplessly, then I can only cultivate this trash technique. However, she immediately mocked herself, it's still better than the ordinary mental cultivation techniques in the pugilistic world. When Ouyang Yang heard this, she comforted her, don't think too much. I'll ask Big Sister Qin and the others later. Subsequently, the 3 of them passed through the small door and returned to Huanxi Manor. After hearing 4th Master Wen's words, escort leader Luo of the Lotus Escort Agency was very upset. His expression was gloomy and uncertain. However, he had no choice but to go to Zhong Xiaohu's small courtyard and wait at the door of his house. As he paced back and forth, he regretted it. He didn't regret speaking ill of others behind their backs. Instead, he regretted that he didn't expect Huanxi Manor to stand up for Zhong Xiaohua. In his opinion, Zhong Xiaohu and his brother were just country bumpkins who had come to Pingyang City less than a year ago. Zhong Xiaohu was lucky enough to exchange Zhong Xiaohua's injury for an opportunity to cultivate internal strength in the martial arts school. He also received some private promises from 4th Master Wen. On the other hand, despite Zhong Xiaohua's injury, he didn't see any loss to Yu Dei. Huanxi Manor also didn't stand up for Zhong Xiaohua. Therefore, escort leader Luo thought that Zhong Xiaohua was just a pushover. In principle, it was reasonable for him to ask Zhong Xiaohua to pay for the meal. If Zhong Xiaohu paid for it, it would naturally make them feel uncomfortable. If he didn't pay, of course, He could make irresponsible remarks in front of Fourth Master Wen. Even if Fourth Master Wen wanted to protect Zhong Xiaohu, he couldn't do anything about it. Things developed according to his own track. Fourth Master Wen had no choice but to call Zhong Xiaohu to confront him and urge him to pay the meal. However, there was a fly in the ointment. Zhong Xiaohu actually paid the meal first, which made Fourth Master Wen seem like a petty person. However, these flaws couldn't obscure the beauty of Jade. It was just that the final outcome was out of his control. Huan Shi Manor actually stood up for Zhong Xiaohua for such a small matter. Even the manor lord of Huan Shi Manor was angry for less than a tael of silver. Although escort leader Luo didn't know the specific reason, he still felt that there were some risks involved in backstabbing people. It was better for him to do less in the future. As for obtaining Zhong Xiaohu's forgiveness, he was still very confident. He was an old man of the Lotus Escort Agency, and an escort leader at that. Zhong Xiaohu was just an escort. If he wanted to continue working in the Lotus Escort Agency, he would definitely accept escort leader Luo's apology. Unfortunately, escort leader Luo paced back and forth in the small courtyard countless times. The sun was already high up in the sky, but there was still no sign of Zhong Xiaohu. Escort leader Luo lost his patience and told the escort who was peeking at him to ask Zhong Xiaohu to come to his place when he returned. He then walked away with his hands behind his back, muttering as he walked, "Isn't he just an escort?" However, even though it was already dusk, Zhong Xiaohu still didn't come to look for escort leader Luo. Escort leader Luo was a little angry. This Zhong Xiaohu was really putting on airs. Did he really want him, the escort leader, to apologize to him? Just as he was thinking, he saw an escort run over in a panic. He entered the door and shouted, "Escort leader, it's bad, it's bad." Escort leader Luo saw this and scolded, "What's bad? Why are you so flustered? Is the sky falling down?" The escort smiled and said, "It's not that serious. Escort leader, it's just that Zhong Xiaohu has returned." Escort leader Luo's frown deepened. He said, "Didn't you tell him that I asked him to come over?" The escort said, "I told him that. That's why I said something bad happened." "Then why?" Escort leader Luo asked curiously. The executioner replied, "Just now, I saw Zhong Xiaohu return to the small courtyard. I quickly told him that you had been waiting for him all morning, but he didn't appear. When you left in the afternoon, you instructed him to quickly come to your residence to look for you when he returned." Escort leader Luo spat and scolded, "Why can't you speak properly? Why did you say that I waited for him all morning? Just tell him to come find me. Why do you have so much nonsense to say?" The escort continued, "Yes, this lowly one deserves to die. I don't know how to speak well." However, Zhong Xiaohu ignored him and entered the room with a smile. This lowly one found it strange. I walked to the door and saw Zhong Xiaohu packing his things. I asked him what he was doing. "What do you think he said?" Escort leader Luo said, "How would I know why he's packing? It can't be that he's quitting the escort agency, right?" The escort called out in surprise, "You're so smart, escort leader. No wonder you're the escort leader." That's what he said. That's why I hurried over to report it to you. What? He quit? Escort leader Luo cried out in surprise and stood up from his chair. He pushed the escort away and rushed out of the door. The escort leader watched escort leader Luo's figure disappear quickly and said self-deprecatingly, "This escort leader's lightness technique is quite impressive. However, the sky hasn't fallen yet. There's no need for him to quit so quickly." By the time escort leader Luo arrived at Zhong Xiaohu's room, Zhong Xiaohu had already finished packing. Escort leader Luo entered the room and immediately asked, "Zhong Xiaohu, I heard that you don't want to work at the escort agency anymore?" Zhong Xiaohu saw that it was escort leader Luo and smiled. "Yes, escort leader. I've already completed the transaction with Fourth Master Wen at the accounts office. I came back to pack up and prepare to leave." Escort leader Luo frowned. "You've completed the transaction with the accounts office? Don't leave any loose ends." Zhong Xiaohu said, "Don't worry, escort leader. I've already completed the transaction a few days ago. I've only collected my monthly salary today. We're even now." Escort leader Luo said, "Actually, I'm just stating facts about your younger brother's matter. You know that I've always been considerate of the escort agency, not just you." Zhong Xiaohu interrupted Escort Luo and said, "I know what you're thinking, Escort Luo. This matter is already in the past, so let him go." Escort leader Luo said happily, "So, Zhong Xiaohu, you've forgiven me?" As he spoke, he took out the 10 taels of silver and handed it to Zhong Xiaohu, saying, "Then take this back." Zhong Xiaohu smiled and looked at Escort leader Luo. He pushed his hand back and said, "Escort leader Luo is wholeheartedly devoted to the public, so this one must fulfill your wish and act according to the rules. This one will naturally listen to Escort leader Luo. As for whether or not you've forgiven me, I'm sure Escort leader Luo is overthinking things. How can this one complain about the rules? I've already paid my younger brother's food expenses to the accounts office. Now that I've completed the transaction, there's no reason for me to take it back. These 10 taels of silver were given by Huanxi Manor. What does it have to do with me? If Escort leader Luo wants to take it back, you should look for Huanxi Manor. It's not right for you to look for me." Escort leader Luo didn't seem to hear him and kept pushing back. In the end, Zhong Xiaohu had no choice but to put the silver on the table, saying, "Escort leader Luo, why do you have to make things difficult for this one? Just leave the silver here." Escort leader Luo said helplessly, "Fourth master when said earlier that I must obtain your understanding no matter what." Zhong Xiaohu smiled, "Didn't I say just now? This one has no complaints about the rules that are beneficial to the escort agency. There's no need to talk about understanding. Moreover, fourth master when didn't mention this when I bid farewell to him. There's no need for escort leader Luo to take it to heart." Escort leader Luo's heart leaped when he heard this. He said with a smile, "In that case, I'll take it as your understanding. Actually, Zhong Xiaohu, you're doing well in the escort agency. Why did you suddenly resign? I was thinking of waiting for you to work well for a few more years before suggesting to fourth master when to let you become an escort. We'll work well together in the future and let you continue to be my assistant. I'll train you well. With your departure, the escort agency will lose a good person." "What a pity." Zhong Xiaohu smiled and cupped his hands, "Thank you for your kind intentions, escort leader Luo. It's a pity that this one doesn't have the fortune to enjoy it." Escort leader Luo patted Zhong Xiaohu's shoulder. "It's all right, Zhong Xiaohu. You'll always be my best assistant. I'll always keep the door open for you. If you're not doing well outside, you can come to me anytime. I'll definitely put in a good word for you to the head escort." Zhong Xiaohu cupped his hands again. "All right, I'll remember your words, escort leader Luo. This one will take his leave now. If there comes a day when this one doesn't do well in the Misty School, I'll definitely come back to look for you. I hope escort leader Luo can give this one some food to eat when the time comes." After that, he picked up his bag and went out without looking back. Escort leader Luo smiled as he looked at Zhong Xiaohu's back. "No problem, Zhong Xiaohu. If you don't do well in the Misty School in the future, feel free to look for me." "What? Misty School?" Escort leader Luo finally realized what was going on. At this moment, the escort from before slipped in and said to escort leader Luo, "Escort leader Luo, I just received news from Yu Dei and Yu Lun from the martial arts dojo that Zhong Xiaohu got lucky and was accepted as a disciple of the Misty School. Yu Dei and Yu Lun both went to drink to drown their sorrows." Slap. Escort leader Luo slapped the escort's face and said sternly, "Why didn't you say so earlier? Didn't I just find out and come to tell you?" The escort covered his face and said with grievance, "You." Escort leader Luo stomped his foot and pointed at the man. He didn't know what to say. He picked up the silver on the table and ran out of the room as if he wanted to chase after Zhong Xiaohu. However, Zhong Xiaohu had already mounted his horse and ran off with the other disciples of the Misty School. At this moment, Zhong Xiaohua of the Huanxi Manor was sitting in her room. A sky-blue booklet was spread out on the table, and beside it were a few thin pages of paper filled with writing. Needless to say, it was the Carefree Heart Sutra and the first 3 levels of the ethereal steps. Zhong Xiaohua first picked up the Carefree Heart Sutra and skimmed through it. She had never seen an ordinary inner force cultivation method before and didn't know what it was like. However, although she didn't read through the contents of the Carefree Heart Sutra, she could understand that it was divided into 18 levels and each level had a specific chant and taboo for cultivation. It didn't look like there was anything wrong with it, but she didn't understand why Oyu Peng said that he didn't know how to cultivate it. Could it be that this was an incomplete cultivation technique? Or was it a cultivation method that could easily lead to cultivation deviation? Just as she was thinking, someone knocked on the door. The business trip will be from May 27th to June 4th. In the beginning, my notebook was intact and I could upload it, so I posted it as I wrote. Later on, there was a problem and I wrote a note for leave. As long as everyone is happy reading it, it doesn't matter if it's hard for me. If you have time, please come to the book review and comment on it. Here, thank you. 2 Butterflies in the Summer, Baby Girl, Brother Shin 2010, Love Loves Tong Li 520. Hurry up and get up, Giza and the rest of the readers. Please bookmark it, thank you. Chapter 152. Zhong Xiaohua tidied up the table and opened the door to find Qiu Tong standing at the door. Zhong Xiaohua hurriedly invited Qiu Tong into the room. Qiu Tong smiled and said, "There's no need. Zhong Xiaohua, Miss told me to call you. She's still waiting." Zhong Xiaohua walked out of the room and asked, "Big sister Qiu Tong, it's almost time for dinner. Why did the manor head suddenly call me? Is there anything good to eat?" A strange look flashed across Qiu Tong's face. The smile in her eyes deepened. She said, "There's nothing delicious, but there's something very interesting I want to tell you. Come with me quickly." Zhong Xiaohua's curiosity was piqued when she heard that there was something interesting. She followed Qiu Tong into the inner courtyard. Just as she approached the lobby of the inner court, she heard the clear and melodious voice of a woman. Zhong Xiaohua already knew that Mistress Qin of the ethereal sect had come. She recalled that Oyu Yang had mentioned earlier that she wanted to find Mistress Qin to ask about the Carefree Heart Sutra. Thinking that there must be a solution, she was overjoyed and quickened her steps. Only Oyu Yang and Aunt Qin were sitting in the great hall. They were talking to each other. When they heard footsteps and saw a familiar figure enter, they looked at each other and smiled. Zhong Xiaohua walked into the great hall. She bowed to the two of them and sat down on a chair. She looked at Oyu Yang and asked, "Did big sister Oyu call me over because of the Carefree Heart Sutra?" Oyu Yang looked at her teasingly and smiled. She said, "That's right. I've already asked big sister Qin about it. You'd better listen to her for the details." "Haha, you're really lucky." Zhong Xiaohua scratched her head and looked at Aunt Qin. She asked, "Big sister Qin, what's going on? Hurry up and tell me. I'm worried sick." Aunt Qin looked at the anxious Zhong Xiaohua and said unhurriedly, "This matter is very simple. It is said that our Misty sect has been passed down for thousands of years. In these thousands of years, countless heroes have emerged. Many of them were extremely talented and in the process of practicing martial arts, they inevitably had their own insights and experiences. There were even many grandmasters who were able to create their own martial arts. The second floor of the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion not only stores the martial arts manuals passed down from the Misty School, but also some martial arts manuals created later on. The Carefree Heart Sutra is an internal strength cultivation method created by a senior from the Misty School hundreds of years ago." Hearing this, Zhong Xiaohua let out a sigh of relief. She said, "Since it's an internal strength cultivation method, that's good. I don't want to pick some top-notch internal strength. It's fine as long as I can practice it." When Aunt Qin heard this, she wanted to say something, but with a phut, she laughed out loud. She waited until she drank some water before saying, "Although this Carefree Heart Sutra is an internal energy cultivation method, it's actually a self-hypnosis technique." Hypnosis? Method? Zhong Xiaohua didn't understand. She asked, "What does this have to do with an internal strength cultivation method?" Aunt Qin continued, "The senior who created the Carefree Heart Sutra was said to be extremely intelligent. The second floor of the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion has other internal strength cultivation methods and palm techniques that he created. However, this senior had a problem. Perhaps he used his brain too much, but he often couldn't sleep at night, which is commonly known as insomnia. In order to treat this insomnia, he sought out many doctors from the sect and the Jianghu, but none of them were effective. Later on, he felt that it was better to rely on himself than to rely on others. When he got older and had accumulated internal strength, he began to think of a way to treat his insomnia. After 10 years of painstaking research, he finally created the Carefree Heart Sutra. Carefree means to have no worries. In his opinion, being able to have a good night's sleep was the most beautiful and worry-free thing in the world. Zhong Xiaohua was stunned. She said in shock, This senior is too extravagant. He created an internal strength cultivation method just to let himself have a good night's sleep? Even if that's the case, he didn't have to put this little book on the second floor of the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion. Aunt Jean covered her mouth and laughed, there's no helping it. This senior has truly contributed a lot to the Misty School. Many of his martial arts secret manuals and experiences were collected in the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion. This Carefree Heart Sutra is naturally no exception. However, this story is known by the entire upper class of the Misty School. Therefore, when they choose an internal strength cultivation method for their disciples, they won't pick this book. This is already an open secret of the Misty School. I reckon that other than its creator, no one else has seen this Carefree Heart Sutra. Hearing this, Zhong Xiaohua's heart moved. She probed, Big Sister Qin, why don't you help me take a look and see how to cultivate this Carefree Heart Sutra? Or see if this is the Carefree Heart Sutra? Aunt Jean hurriedly waved her hands and said, I've never seen this Carefree Heart Sutra before, so I can't tell if it's real or fake. Moreover, without the sect master's permission, I wouldn't dare to look at this Carefree Heart Sutra on my own. Even if it's not a real internal strength cultivation method, I'm sure the sect master has already told you about this. You have to be careful not to let a second person see the contents inside. This is not allowed by the sect's rules. I'm going to faint. Zhong Xiaohua thought to herself, this sect's rules are too harsh. This way, I won't be able to know if this Carefree Heart Sutra is the real Carefree Heart Sutra. However, there was still a trace of excitement and expectation in his heart. Perhaps the one he took from the third floor really wasn't the Carefree Heart Sutra that they were talking about. However, if this Carefree Heart Sutra was really the one they were talking about, then his luck was really unusual. There were many internal strength secret manuals on the second floor. Even if he randomly took one, he might not be able to get this Carefree Heart Sutra. Instead, he went to the third floor to take it. Thinking about the small box on the square table and not on the bookshelf, Zhong Xiaohua's heart thumped again. Perhaps they treated it specially because it wasn't a real internal strength cultivation method. Alas! Zhong Xiaohua sighed bitterly and said, my hands are really smelly. Yu Yang, who was beside her, laughed and said, your luck is really good. Why are you unhappy? Zhong Xiaohua bitterly smiled and said, I'm the only one who has good luck with this Carefree Heart Sutra. This thing might be useful to others, but I never have insomnia. I sleep well. As long as I fall asleep, I won't wake up even if someone calls me. How can I use this Carefree Heart Sutra? Phut! The three people in the hall laughed. They had all heard the story of Zhong Xiaohua following He Tianshu in the small town. They never thought that there would be someone who would sleep on the road while walking. In that case, this Carefree Heart Sutra was trash to Zhong Xiaohua. However, Yu Yang still advised, I'm not saying that your luck is good here, but on the ethereal steps. That Aunt Jean also said, that's right. This ethereal steps is placed on the third floor of the book collection pavilion. It's not something that ordinary people can cultivate. If you went to take it yourself, you might not be able to choose it. Today, you effortlessly obtained the first 3 levels of this cultivation technique. If this isn't good luck, what else can it be? Hearing this, Zhong Xiaohua's gloomy mood turned for the better when he saw how Aunt Jean held the ethereal steps in high esteem. He asked curiously, this ethereal steps is a movement technique, right? What is its use? Aunt Jean laughed and said, it's really scary to have no knowledge. Let me help you clear your ignorance. This Misty School has 3 great divine techniques, the ethereal 7 swords, the Ethereal Divine Technique, and the Ethereal Steps. The Ethereal Seven Swords is naturally a sword technique. When used, it can shock the heavens and make ghosts and gods weep. It's incomparably powerful. The Ethereal Divine Technique is our Misty School's core internal technique. It's said that it's also incomparably powerful. As for the Ethereal Steps, it's a type of light body technique. Light body technique? Zhong Xiaohua was pleasantly surprised. This was the martial technique that she had been admiring for a long time. That's right. The Ethereal Steps is the so-called light body technique when used at high altitudes. However, it also has other precious aspects. If used in battle, it can be combined with your fist techniques, sword techniques, and so on. It will become a peerless movement technique, increasing the might of your other martial techniques by 30%. Aunt Qin explained. Ah, so powerful. Then didn't I strike it rich? Zhong Xiaohua was grinning from ear to ear. Aunt Qin continued, that's right. Otherwise, how could it be called one of the Misty School's 3 great divine techniques? You have indeed struck it rich. Zhong Xiaohua nodded thoughtfully. No wonder He Tianshu was overjoyed when he heard that he could also cultivate the Ethereal Steps. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua so happy, Aunt Qin struck a blow to her. However, this Ethereal Steps has a total of 9 levels. You have only obtained the first 3 levels, so you don't know if it's a close combat movement technique or a light body technique for high altitudes. Zhong Xiaohua was a little carried away as she reached her hand into her bosom and said, won't I know if I take a look? Seeing this, Ouyang Yang sternly said, Zhong Xiaohua. When Zhong Xiaohua heard Ouyang Yang's reprimand, she immediately understood what was going on. Her face flushed red as she blushed and said, Sister Ouyang. Seeing that she understood, Ouyang Yang's tone relaxed and she said, Zhong Xiaohua, the Misty School's sect rules are not to be trifled with. Everything that was said in the discussion hall and Zhong Chengyue's words, you must remember them in your heart. If you violate them, no one will let you off just because of your young age. Actually, you might not know this, but there are many disciples younger than you in the sect who are diligently cultivating and constantly memorizing the sect rules. You were just lucky to have some opportunities, so you must not let your guard down. Zhong Xiaohua carefully said, I understand, Manor Lord Ouyang. I won't dare to do it again in the future. Aunt Qin also sternly said, an ordinary man's wealth is his own ruin. There are some things that must be buried deep in your heart and must not be told to anyone. If anyone knows that you have the Ethereal Steps technique, I reckon that you won't be able to live in peace. Even your life will be in danger. An ordinary man's wealth is his own ruin. This was the second time that Zhong Xiaohua heard someone advise her like this. Thinking about herself, it was true that she relied on her young age to say and do some childish things. But if it was noticed by someone with ulterior motives, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't think of her. After seeing her, she would have to be more careful. Aunt Qin continued, actually, even if you took out the Ethereal Steps technique, I still wouldn't dare to look at it. Without the sect leader's permission, I have no right to practice any of the sect's martial arts, not to mention the 3 divine techniques. Only then did Zhong Xiaohua deeply understand that if it wasn't for Ouyang Peng's care for his biological sister, if she hadn't sacrificed herself to save Ouyang Yang, how could she have obtained such a technique? Not to mention that her second brother had also benefited from joining the Misty School. This black-clothed old man's palm strike was truly not unjust. Seeing that Zhong Xiaohua was somewhat absent-minded, Ouyang Yang said, Zhong Xiaohua, you must remember that this Ethereal Steps, if you don't know it, you can ask He Tianshu. He has the sect leader's permission. Others, including your brother Zhong Xiaohu, are also not allowed to practice it. As for that Carefree Heart Sutra, you can keep it as a memento, but you can't let others see it nor can you lose it. If you feel unsafe, you can burn it. Zhong Xiaohua asked, then how about I return it to sect leader Ouyang? Ouyang Yang proudly said, how can the Misty School take back something that was given out? If that was the case, when Zhong Chengyu gave you the technique, he would have already taken it back. Would you still need to think about it now? Zhong Xiaohua came to a sudden realization. The rules of this large sect were really not ordinary. She could only say, I understand, big sister Ouyang. Yu Yang saw that she had taught her enough and said, "All right, it's about time. You should go back early." When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, she hurriedly stood up to leave. As she walked, she thought, "I've already lectured her for half a day, but she didn't give me any benefits. Leaving a meal would be good." Zhong Xiaohua pondered as he returned to his room. To be honest, he was still skeptical of Aunt Qin's words. Even if the senior from the ethereal sect was a genius, there was no way he could create 18 levels of hypnotism. That would be too much of a joke. If that was the case, then wouldn't the other works of the senior be at a level that would shock the ancient and dazzle the modern? And the most important thing in his heart was that he didn't really randomly take this book from the second floor. He still had a trace of hope in his heart. But Yu Yang's warning completely shattered his little calculations. Of these two books, other than the ethereal steps, he could cultivate with He Tianshu. The Carefree Heart Sutra could only be enjoyed by him alone. It could be said that there was an ancient, but there was no successor. The Carefree Heart Sutra had a huge hat on its head that could cure insomnia. No matter who went to the library to choose a secret manual, even if they suffered from insomnia and forgetfulness, they still wouldn't choose this book. Who would be as stupid as Zhong Xiaohua to not take a good martial arts secret manual? Of course, if there was a martial arts novice in the future, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't casually take this trash. But since there was an example of Zhong Xiaohua in the discussion hall today, there would definitely be people who would spread this story through the ages and become the teacher of others. No one would do such a stupid thing again. Thinking about it, Zhong Xiaohua couldn't help but howl to the sky like a hungry wolf under the moonlight. As the ancient people said, information is the most valuable thing. After the meal, Zhong Xiaohua still practiced the Fist of the North Star and the sword in her left hand at the place where she usually practiced martial arts. Now, the Fist of the North Star could be used for ordinary fighting, while the sword in her left hand was a life-saving move. Unless there was no other choice, Zhong Xiaohua wouldn't dare to use it. Thinking about the ethereal steps that she was about to cultivate, Zhong Xiaohua's heart itched. After learning the footwork and qigong, her martial arts could be considered to have some foundation. Other than the internal strength cultivation method, she could also be considered as a martial artist. In the Jianghu, she would have half a place. Didn't this mean that she had fulfilled her wish when she first left the Guozhuang house? After walking out of the forest, Zhong Xiaohua still had a trace of doubt. Where did this He Tianshu run off to? Seeing his wild joy in the afternoon, could it be that he was so happy that he went crazy? If it was her, she definitely wouldn't be so calm. When she came back, she would have asked for the cultivation method. Anyway, Zhong Xiaohua didn't know how to cultivate, so everything was taught by He Tianshu. It was reasonable for her to let He Tianshu see it first. But she didn't see him for the entire afternoon. Where did he go? When Zhong Xiaohua walked back to the small courtyard, he saw that the light in He Tianshu's room was still on. He walked over and knocked on the door. Sure enough, He Tianshu's voice came from the door, "Come in." Zhong Xiaohua pushed the door open and asked with concern, "Captain He, are you all right?" He Tianshu was stunned. "Pretty good." "What's wrong?" "Zhong Xiaohua, do you see that I'm not in good spirits?" Zhong Xiaohua said, "No, your face looks very smooth and bright. Your complexion is very good. What I mean is, why didn't you come looking for me in the afternoon?" Hearing this, He Tianshu's expression changed. He said, "You still have the nerve to say that. Zhong Xiaohua, at the very least, I've taught you a set of fist techniques. Why don't you remember how good I am?" Zhong Xiaohua asked curiously, "Captain He, what's the meaning of this? You are my martial arts teacher who initiated me. How can I not remember how good you are?" He Tianshu blurted out, "Since you know that I'm your first teacher, why didn't you come looking for me earlier?" Zhong Xiaohua suddenly understood. Sigh, she had thought wrongly. It wasn't that He Tianshu wasn't anxious to see the ethereal steps. It was just that he couldn't bring himself to ask for it in person. When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, she said with a tranquil face, "Captain He, don't be angry. I don't know the ways of the world either. I'm still waiting for you to take it." He Tianshu's expression was slightly restrained as he said, "It's not that I don't want to take it. But this ethereal steps was given to you by sect master. I'm only giving you guidance when you don't know. How can I ask for it from you directly? Zhong Xiaohua thought to herself, keep pretending. If it was me a year ago, I might have believed it. But now, there's no way you can lie to me. Hence, Zhong Xiaohua took out the Ethereal Steps Cultivation Technique Manual and handed it to He Tianshu, saying, then, Captain He, please take a look and point me in the right direction. He Tianshu smiled. Just as he was about to take it, he suddenly thought of something and asked, have you seen it? Is there no problem at all? Zhong Xiaohua said, I haven't seen it yet. You can take a look first. When He Tianshu heard this, he stretched out his hand and wanted to retract it. He really couldn't resist the temptation of the secret manual. If he didn't accept it, what should he do when he thought of Zhong Chengyue's instructions and his guidance? Please collect it. Thank you. Chapter 153. When Zhong Xiaohua saw He Tianshu's hesitant look, she found it funny, but more than that, she admired him. This Misty School was indeed a famous sect in the Jianghu. The way they passed down orders and the way they obeyed was not just a little strict. He Tianshu didn't dare to practice it first just because the sect leader gave some instructions and didn't directly ask him to teach. This kind of execution made Zhong Xiaohua secretly praise him. This Misty School had stood tall in the Jianghu for many years and didn't have an undeserved reputation. Thus, Zhong Xiaohua's eyes turned and she said very seriously to He Tianshu, Team Leader He, I think there is a very serious problem with this ethereal steps. I need you to help me solve it. He Tianshu's eyes lit up and he said, tell me about it first. Zhong Xiaohua waved the few pages in front of him and said, I've been looking at it all afternoon, but I can't understand what's written here. I'm really confused. I think it's better to ask Team Leader He to look at it properly and roughly tell me how to practice it. Once I've gotten the hang of it, I'll have more specific questions to ask. Zhong Xiaohua looked at He Tianshu again and handed over the few pages that had suppressed He Tianshu's emotions. She said, what do you think? He Tianshu thought for a moment and gritted his teeth. He said, what you say makes sense. This is a good question. If I wait until you understand it, the sun will have risen from the west. I'll prepare to answer your first question first. Let's talk about it after you've roughly looked through the steps. When Zhong Xiaohua saw that He Tianshu accepted it, she clapped her hands together as if to dust them off. She said with a smile, then I'll have to trouble Team Leader He. However, there's one thing. When you teach me the steps in the future, you must be patient. Don't teach it like a fist technique. He Tianshu first smiled and then glared at Zhong Xiaohua. He said, you know your own situation. I hope you won't disappoint the sect leader's painstaking efforts. Zhong Xiaohua curled her lips and said helplessly, all right, I admit that my talent is limited, but I'm still willing to use 100% of my strength to practice this escaping step technique. Fleeing. Footwork. When He Tianshu heard this, he smiled bitterly and said, the 3 divine skills of the Misty School, you actually said that it's used to escape. Forget it, you should go back. It's getting late, don't sleep in my room anymore. I'll tell you when I have a rough understanding of it. After saying that, he chased the guy who looked down on his divine power out of the house. As Zhong Xiaohua walked, she was still unconvinced and said, isn't Qigong used to escape? My fist technique is average and I don't know any internal energy. If I can't beat him, why don't I rely on this footwork to escape? He Tianshu closed his hearing, closed the door, and began to study the ethereal footwork. When Zhong Xiaohua returned to her room, she casually picked up a book on herbs and started flipping through it. But no matter how she looked at it, she was unable to calm her heart. Involuntarily, she still took out the sky blue Carefree Heart Sutra. Flipping to the preface on the first page, she first skimmed through it, but she didn't find the word ethereal, nor the words insomnia and forgetfulness. After she read it carefully, she had a plan in her heart. It turned out that this preface said that there was a spirit in heaven and earth. Heaven and earth Yuan Qi was the essence of this world. If she could draw this Yuan Qi into her body, she would be able to change her meridians and cleanse her marrow. Not only would it strengthen the body, it would also multiply her magical powers. If she succeeded, She might even be able to extend her life. This Carefree Heart Sutra was a technique for drawing yuan qi into the human body. It also taught the method of changing meridians and cleansing meridians. Zhong Xiaohua closed the secret book and was secretly happy. She had searched high and low for it, only to find it by chance. Wasn't this the martial arts secret manual that he had been yearning for day and night? Wasn't the heaven and earth's yuan qi the same as his inner strength? Wasn't this divine ability the power of inner strength? That was something that was even more powerful than his pure strength. Naturally, it was incomparably powerful. Suddenly, Zhong Xiaohua remembered that her second brother had once told her that when practicing Neigong, she had to turn her palms to the sky and imagine that Neigong would enter through her forehead. He wondered if the Carefree Heart Sutra was also practiced in the same way. Thinking of this, he hurriedly opened the secret manual and flipped to the first level of the cultivation method. Sure enough, the first level of the cultivation method was written as follows. To attract the Neigong into one's body, one had to first sense the heaven and earth's yuan qi. Then, one had to use a special breathing method to open all the pores in one's body and attract the Neigong into one's body. After that, it explained in detail how to sense the heaven and earth's yuan qi, how to breathe, and how to open the pores. This way, the Neigong would follow a special route to cleanse the meridians and finally store it in the middle dantian of one's body. At the end, it explained that if one could sense the heaven and earth's yuan qi and was able to accumulate a certain amount of Neigong in the middle dantian, it would mean that the first level of the cultivation method had been mastered. Then, one could proceed to the second level of cultivation. Reading up to this point, Zhong Xiaohua stopped flipping through the pages. He knew that the process seemed very simple, but with Zhong Xiaohu's aptitude, he still had to practice for a long time. As for himself, he would increase his strength by 3 times first. As for the second level, he would talk about it later. Just based on this point, Zhong Xiaohua was praiseworthy. Not only was he hardworking, but he was also willing to progress step by step and not do useless work. Of course, knowing one's own limitations was even more praiseworthy. After Zhong Xiaohua finished reading, he carefully savored it in his mind. Only then did he flip open the secret manual and read it again. When he realized that there was no mistake in his memory, he closed the manual and put it back into his clothes. Zhong Xiaohua sat upright on the Kang bed with a hesitant expression. Zhong Xiaohu had repeatedly warned him about the cultivation of this inner force cultivation method. If he did not have a master to guide him, he must not take the risk and try it himself. It was extremely easy for him to go berserk. However, Zhong Xiaohua was the only one who could read this Carefree Heart Sutra. There were so many people in the Misty School, but not a single one of them had learned this inner force cultivation method. Zhong Xiaohua could not possibly go to Oyu Peng and ask him to take the time out of his busy schedule to give him pointers. Thinking about how this delicacy was in his hands, he could not even open his mouth. The taste of it was simply unbearable. In the end, Zhong Xiaohua made up his mind. As the saying went, wealth comes from danger. If he only wanted to be safe and secure, he could just stay in the Guozhuang house. Why did he have to come all the way to Pingyang City? Besides, Zhong Xiaohua could vaguely feel that this cultivation method was extraordinary. Even if Tianshu really wanted to teach him other inner force cultivation methods now, Zhong Xiaohua might not be willing. Moreover, this cultivation method had 18 levels. It should not be too dangerous for the most basic cultivation method. Since he had made up his mind, Zhong Xiaohua could no longer suppress his impulses. He sat cross-legged on the Kang bed and looked at his nose, then his heart. Following the method in the Heart Sutra, he tried the 9 shallow and 1 deep breathing method. Yes, that was right. It was the special breathing method of the 9 shallow and 1 deep. According to the records in the Heart Sutra, Zhong Xiaohua first breathed slightly hurriedly for 3 times, then paused for a moment. Then, he breathed rapidly for 6 times in a row. Finally, he inhaled deeply and made a short exhalation. Although the Heart Sutra described these steps in detail, to be honest, the interval between each breath and the length of the breath could be discussed. If there was not a master beside him to give him pointers, who would know which was the correct one? As such, Zhong Xiaohua could not follow the Heart Sutra's instructions even after breathing for a long time. He could not sense the qi of heaven and earth around him. Zhong Xiaohua could not help but laugh at himself. If this is the way to cultivate inner strength, how could I possibly suffer from qi deviation? However, when he thought about it, other people poured their inner strength into their forehead, while he poured it into his pores. The method was different, so perhaps the result would be different. At worst, he would go wrong and burn his skin and fur. Since there were distracting thoughts in his mind, the 9 shallow and 1 deep breathing method was naturally disrupted. Zhong Xiaohua quickly gathered his thoughts and wholeheartedly focused on the 9 shallow and 1 deep method. It had to be said that there was one good thing about Zhong Xiaohua, and that was that he was very single-minded when doing things. Not long after, it was as if he had really entered the state and was immersed in the special breathing rhythm. However, he did not feel any qi of heaven and earth from beginning to end. Zhong Xiaohua's cultivation was good, but in his excitement, he forgot about his own characteristics. Just as he closed his eyes and practiced the breathing technique he had just learned, midnight arrived. Zhong Xiaohua fell asleep. Just like that, he fell asleep with his 5 hearts facing the sky. He fell asleep with 9 shallow breaths and 1 deep breath. In Zhong Xiaohua's sleep, which was filled with flickering lights, the flickering lights seemed to be breathing as well. They had different frequencies, and correspondingly, these frequencies also affected Zhong Xiaohua. His special breathing method slowly mutated. With the flickering lights, he constantly adjusted the speed and length of his breathing. Not long after, Zhong Xiaohua's breathing method was completely different from Zhong Xiaohua's own. It seemed to correspond with the flickering breathing method, forming a brand new 9 shallow and 1 deep method. At the moment when Zhong Xiaohua's unique breathing method was formed, Zhong Xiaohua seemed to have suddenly blended into an environment with flickering and frequency. In an instant, from the distant starry sky, countless stars seemed to be attracted by Zhong Xiaohua's frequency, or perhaps they were attracted by his breathing. The starlight passed through the endless starry sky, ignoring the roofs and other objects, and shone on Zhong Xiaohua, who was sitting cross-legged. And the starlight, although it was light, was too thin to be seen when it reached Zhong Xiaohua's side. Although it was dense, it could not illuminate Zhong Xiaohua's figure like it usually could at night. At this time, Zhong Xiaohua was still hidden in the darkness, and under the special breathing and flickering lights, his figure seemed to be faintly blurred. It was also at this moment that all the pores on Zhong Xiaohua's body opened up in an instant. They were like small mouths that greedily sucked in the surrounding starlight. The barely visible starlight swarmed over like tired birds returning to their nests. The starlight entered Zhong Xiaohua's pores and stopped moving forward. After a while, more and more starlight entered his pores, and the amount of starlight outside his body was sucked in decreased. At this moment, the starlight all over his body suddenly moved. It was according to the method Zhong Xiaohua had seen in the Carefree Heart Sutra, guiding the starlight to follow a specific path in his body. In an instant, the starlight in his pores was swept clean, and the starlight outside his body could be rapidly sucked in again. The starlight that entered his body followed the circulation path in the Heart Sutra for a cycle. It did not enter Zhong Xiaohua's middle dantian, but continued to circulate. However, as it continued to circulate, the pores all over his body had an endless stream of starlight converging into it. Logically speaking, although the starlight was barely visible, with endless starlight entering his body, there should be more and more starlight in his body. However, something strange happened. As the starlight that circulated in his body increased in quantity, it did not become thicker. Instead, it underwent a qualitative change in his body, forming something else. This thing was clearly purer than the starlight, and much smaller in size. It was the qi of heaven and earth mentioned in the Heart Sutra. Not only that, although the pure qi of heaven and earth should have increased under the mutation of the endless starlight, under the constant flashing in Zhong Xiaohua's body, the qi of heaven and earth seemed to be refined, becoming increasingly scarce. It was actually reduced by 70 to 80%. In this way, although there was a lot of starlight around Zhong Xiaohua and it was constantly being absorbed into his pores, the amount that was converted into refined qi of heaven and earth through his circulation was still inaudible. While Zhong Xiaohua was still in a daze, the night passed. When the morning sun in the east leaped over the horizon, Zhong Xiaohua opened his sleeping eyes. The flashing in his eyes was still as fleeting as before. When Zhong Xiaohua woke up and saw that he was still in the same state, he could not help but smile bitterly. Had he been sitting like this for the entire night? However, when he jumped off the Kang bed, he did not feel any soreness in his limbs. On the contrary, he felt refreshed. It was more comfortable than lying on the Kang bed. This caught Zhong Xiaohua off guard. He thought to himself, why don't I just sit and sleep like this in the future? The early bird gets the worm. Zhong Xiaohua diligently practiced his life-saving sword moves and the defensive fist of the Big Dipper in the forest. Today was destined to be an amazing day. Zhong Xiaohua, who woke up early, had just practiced his beloved fist of the Big Dipper to the 8th time when that familiar flow came unexpectedly. This made Zhong Xiaohua's self-esteem, which had suffered a blow last night, feel a little comforted. Could this be the reward for practicing so hard for so long? Had the fist of the Big Dipper advanced? Sure enough, in Zhong Xiaohua's anticipation, he practiced the second 8 times. The flow still appeared on the 8th time. Zhong Xiaohua could finally confirm that his fist of the Big Dipper had indeed improved. However, if that was the case, Zhong Xiaohua could not help but look forward to it even more. Would the flow appear on time every time he practiced the fist of the Big Dipper when he practiced it to the end? Thinking of the 18th level of the Carefree Heart Sutra last night, Zhong Xiaohua also took the initiative to divide his fist of the Big Dipper into 9 levels. Of course, the one that appeared once after 9 times was the first level, and the one that appeared once after each time was the 9th level. Thinking of this, Zhong Xiaohua could not help but smile. This was really a good day. Smelling the clear and fresh air, Zhong Xiaohua suddenly had an idea. Last night, his 9 shallow and 1 deep breathing method did not work. Was it because the air at night was not fresh enough? Would it have a different effect in the morning when everything woke up? Thinking of this, Zhong Xiaohua immediately sat down in the forest. He thought of the breathing method last night and practiced the 9 shallow and 1 deep method. Speaking of which, it was strange. Now, Zhong Xiaohua said that he was thinking of the breathing method before he fell asleep last night. However, when he actually breathed, he was using the adjusted rhythm in his sleep. In fact, although these 2 rhythms were very different, with Zhong Xiaohua's level, he could not feel any difference. Even if you told him now, he might not believe it. Speaking of which, it was also unusual. Generally speaking, this kind of breathing method that was passed down orally could not be described in words. One could only slowly figure out the secret under the guidance of the master. Normally, a talented and intelligent person would have to try countless times just to get the beginner's breathing method. Some would even need a few days to remember and truly master it. However, this Zhong Xiaohua was extremely proficient in it in just a few breaths. He could not help but sigh. The protagonist was invincible. Although Zhong Xiaohua did not know if his breathing method was correct, he faintly felt that his entire body suddenly had a clear feeling. It was as if there was an indescribable communication between his body and the outside. He was somewhat enlightened. Perhaps this was the opening of his pores. However, he followed the method in the Heart Sutra to sense the chi of heaven and earth in the outside world. It was still a blank. He did not discover a trace of it. What was going on? After a long while, there was still no progress. Zhong Xiaohua stood up resentfully. He patted the dust off his body and walked out of the forest. Although he felt a little regretful at this time, he was not troubled or impatient. Nonsense. When Zhong Xiaohu practiced the inner force cultivation method, he had told him that the sense of qi was not something that ordinary people could have. It would take a very long time for there to be progress. Zhong Xiaohu himself had spent a considerable amount of time to find the sense of qi. Zhong Xiaohua was clear about his own aptitude. If he could find the qi of heaven and earth today, Zhong Xiaohua would not dare to believe it. Moreover, didn't he already eat the worm today? The progress of the Big Dipper magical fist had pointed out a path for him. Suddenly, Zhong Xiaohua had a new idea. In the past, after practicing the Big Dipper magical fist 81 times, practicing it again would not have any effect. However, he did not know if there would be any surprises left for him now. Unfortunately, he was not in the small house in the mountains right now. He still had things to do. It was already late. He Tianshu and the others wouldn't have finished breakfast, right? Of course, He Tianshu and the others were not as gluttonous as Zhong Xiaohua. The breakfast on the table was not finished. However, He Tianshu's eyes were bloodshot. His absent-minded action of stuffing food into his mouth gave Zhong Xiaohua a big fright. Seeing He Tianshu's excited expression, Zhong Xiaohua carefully asked, "Captain He, where did you go last night?" "Oh, where did I go? I didn't. I just stayed in the house," He Tianshu said unconsciously. Zhong Xiaohua said with concern, "It's good that you didn't go anywhere. I thought you would go out with Ma Jing." "Go out with Ma Jing?" He Tianshu came to his senses and said, "Atilda, what are you talking about?" When he focused his eyes and saw that it was Zhong Xiaohua, his eyes couldn't help but light up. He grabbed Zhong Xiaohua's arm and said, "Zhong Xiaohua, why are you only here now? Did you go practice your fist techniques again? I say, can you be a little more promising and stop practicing those unorthodox fist techniques?" Chapter 154. Zhong Xiaohua was aghast. How could there be such a person? Not advising others to learn well and not even allowing them to practice fist techniques, then what was she supposed to do? He Tianshu saw Zhong Xiaohua's puzzled look and whispered, "Do you know what I did last night?" Zhong Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "Since you didn't go to Intoxicated Fragrance House, you naturally stayed in the house. Could it be that you watched that for the entire night?" Zhong Xiaohua used metaphors towards the end. He Tianshu laughed, "Yes, didn't you see my two bloodshot eyes? I watched it for the entire night. It's really the best. I have lived for so long and have never felt so good. To be able to see it, my life was not in vain." Zhong Xiaohua beamed and said, "Is it really that good? Then I have to take a good look." He Tianshu glared at her and said, "You're still young. Don't be in a hurry to look. Wait till I'm done with it and then I'll show it to you. We agreed that once you're done, you'll immediately show it to me." Zhong Xiaohua still did not let him off. He Tianshu looked around and said, "All right, there are too many people here. It's not convenient to talk about it. Hurry up and eat. After you're done, go to my room. I'll show it to you and let you have a good time." Under He Tianshu's urging, Zhong Xiaohua ate the fastest breakfast she had since entering Huanxi Mountain Villa. Then, the two of them hurriedly left under the puzzled gazes of Nai Xiao'er and the rest. When the two of them returned to He Tianshu's house, He Tianshu carefully looked behind him. After confirming that no one was following them, he closed the door and said to Zhong Xiaohua, "Zhong Xiaohua, you don't know. There's no need to be afraid of not knowing the goods, but to be afraid of comparing the goods. I can be considered a direct disciple of Misty School. In the past, I always felt that what I learned was the essence of Misty School. Last night, I saw the ethereal steps and only then did I know that those were all dregs and rubbish. Compared to this ethereal steps, it's not even worthy of carrying its shoes. Sigh, it's indeed worthy of being one of the 3 divine arts of Misty School." Zhong Xiaohua was confused and asked, "Captain He, what do you mean? Wasn't ethereal steps a type of footwork? Why is it so magical?" He Tianshu curled his lips and said, "I knew it would be like playing the lute to a cow. You don't have my realm, so you wouldn't understand even if I told you." Zhong Xiaohua said, "Captain He, don't forget. Regarding the ethereal steps, Chief Ou was the one who spoke. You must answer." Hearing this, He Tianshu reluctantly said, "This ethereal steps is a type of footwork, which is why it's called magical. Look at the first 3 levels, the first level is the beginning of Qinggong. Ethereal steps is different from other Qinggong, as it doesn't require too much internal energy to support it. It relies more on the surrounding environment and the user's inertia, so it's especially suitable for people like you who don't have any internal energy. Look at the second level, it's a type of footwork. It's a footwork that can be used in a narrow space. According to this, if you master it, when facing an enemy, you can let the enemy slash you with a saber. As long as you use your footwork, the saber won't be able to touch you at all. Ah. Zhong Xiaohua opened her mouth wide and said, "It's that magical?" "Yes, I couldn't believe it when I saw it yesterday," He Tianshu said excitedly. Zhong Xiaohua immediately asked, "Then, when can I learn it?" Wait for me to take a look. After I've completely figured it out, I'll teach you." "How about that?" He Tianshu said awkwardly. When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, the corner of her mouth revealed a slight smile. She thought to herself, "Hehe, usually people say that my aptitude is bad, but look at yourself. Didn't you have this day too?" Presumably, this footwork is very complicated and won't be learned in a short period of time. Zhong Xiaohua's guess wasn't wrong. Compared to Zhong Xiaohua, He Tianshu's aptitude was much better. But in the Misty School filled with talents, to be honest, it wasn't outstanding. What was this ethereal steps? It was known as the Misty School's 3 great divine techniques. It wasn't something that anyone could learn easily. Even a genius like Oyu Peng had to rely on the help of medicine to reach the large success stage. It was simply wishful thinking for He Tianshu to think that he could learn most of it in just a short period of time. However, since Oyu Peng was willing to teach this footwork to him, he naturally had his own plans. The first 3 levels of the technique were only the foundation of the divine technique. The requirements weren't as high as the 4th level and above. The 4th level and above were the true essence of the ethereal steps. That was the Misty School's secret technique that wasn't passed on. If it wasn't a direct disciple, it would definitely not be taught. Therefore, Oyu Peng also knew that with Zhong Xiaohua's aptitude and without guidance, it was impossible for her to successfully learn it. This was why he pulled He Tianshu, who hadn't received any rewards, into this. It had to be said that this was an opportunity for He Tianshu. After Zhong Xiaohua finished sharing her joy, He Tianshu chased her out and said, "Today, I will stay in the house to study your martial arts future. Let Nai Xiao help me take care of the medicine field first. Don't be lazy. Go over there and take a look. Pay attention. You can only learn it after I learn it. Don't drag me down." Zhong Xiaohua was speechless. During this period of time, she went to the medicine field every day. She didn't have any intention of being lazy. Manor Master Oyu had promised her that if she wanted to go, she would go. It didn't matter if she didn't go. This was what Zhong Xiaohua found inconceivable. In Zhong Xiaohua's heart, there was nothing more important than eating. Food was the most important thing for the people. He remembered that when Zhong Xiaohua saw this sentence in a book, he couldn't help but clap his hands. He felt quite a bit of sorrow in his heart. It really hit the bottom of his heart. And He Tianshu's behavior of not eating puzzled him. Wasn't it just a mystical footwork? There was no need to be so focused on it that he forgot to eat and sleep. Of course, as He Tianshu's close companion and part-time disciple, Zhong Xiaohua didn't lack in bringing back food for He Tianshu. Even Nai Xiao was a bit doubtful whether he was bringing back dinner for He Tianshu or supper for himself. When Zhong Xiaohua excitedly brought his concern to He Tianshu's hut and pushed open the door to enter, the scene in front of him made him pull back his foot. The hut was pitch black and there was no light. He could vaguely see a figure leaning over the table, snoring evenly. Zhong Xiaohua immediately understood that He Tianshu was so tired that he fell asleep. Zhong Xiaohua pulled back his foot and gently closed the door. He walked back to his hut and looked at the snacks and other things in his hands. He was secretly delighted. There would be a rich supper tonight. After a short rest, Zhong Xiaohua ran into the woods to practice his fist technique. He really wanted to know if he could make the 11th flow appear. Unfortunately, after he finished practicing the Big Dipper magical fist 8 times, the flow didn't appear. Zhong Xiaohua didn't care. He first practiced the sword in his left hand for a while, then sat down cross-legged and practiced 9 shallow and 1 deep. In the spring night, the cool breeze blew gently. Many of the plants were green and the world was full of vitality. Zhong Xiaohua sat calmly. In the 9 shallow and 1 deep breathing, he quickly entered a very peaceful state. It was a state of indifference without joy or sorrow. It had to be said that this special breathing technique was very effective. After adjusting his state, Zhong Xiaohua began to search for the yuan qi of heaven and earth scattered around him. Maybe the method was wrong, or maybe Zhong Xiaohua's aptitude was not good enough, or maybe there was no yuan qi of heaven and earth in the surroundings. In short, after a long time, Zhong Xiaohua still couldn't find any trace of yuan qi of heaven and earth. Moreover, even if Zhong Xiaohua opened all the pores on his body early on, the endless starlight in the vast night sky didn't swarm into Zhong Xiaohua's body like last night. After busying himself for a long time, Zhong Xiaohua still couldn't find the flow of yuan qi. He stood up, not dispirited in the slightest. Although he was still a youth, after practicing the Carefree Heart Sutra for so long, it seemed to have a trace of influence on Zhong Xiaohua's state of mind. It seemed to have such a flavor. When he passed by He Tianshu's small house, there was still no light. Presumably, this cheap master was still dreaming. After reading for a while, Zhong Xiaohua sat on the Kang bed with his mind in the air like yesterday. Not long after, Zhong Xiaohua fell asleep. Soon, the endless starlight lingered around Zhong Xiaohua like moths to a flame. Compared to the forest, Zhong Xiaohua's 9 shallow and 1 deep didn't change. His pores were also open. The only difference was perhaps the flickering in his dream. Perhaps Twinkle had given life to Zhong Xiaohua's breathing and made it resonate with the stars in the sky, which was why it attracted the starlight. Perhaps. Or perhaps. Was it certain? No one could say for sure. However, the flow of yuan qi in Zhong Xiaohua's body was real. The yuan qi that was dormant in the middle of his dantian during the day came out alive, happily absorbing the addition of the starlight. Under the flickering, it was constantly merging, changing, and compressing. If one observed carefully, one could still see that the yuan qi in the body was strengthened after 1 cycle. However, the increase was very small. Compared to the addition of the starlight, it was insignificant. Very quickly, after 9 days of cultivation, the yuan qi in Zhong Xiaohua's body increased by a lot. However, this was the beginning of the qualitative change to quantitative change. The yuan qi was still very little. Even if Zhong Xiaohua used his power to move it, he still couldn't feel it. He could only sigh and feel inferior. Where is the yuan qi of heaven and earth? Why can't I find it at all? After cultivating like this for a few days, there was still no movement from He Tianshu's side. Zhong Xiaohua wasn't in a hurry. Anyway, he was still looking for the feeling of qi. Without internal energy, how could qigong be called qigong? Even if He Tianshu taught him, he wouldn't be able to use it. However, accidents often happen. One morning, just as Zhong Xiaohua was about to go out to the forest to practice martial arts, he saw a black shadow jump over the wall of the small courtyard. It fell from the sky, giving Zhong Xiaohua a fright. When he looked closely, it was He Tianshu with 2 large dark circles under his eyes. Zhong Xiaohua looked at He Tianshu in shock and said, "Captain He, not sleeping will affect your beauty. Although we men don't need to pay too much attention, we still need to pay a little attention. If your face is seen by the hall master of the pharmacy, he might ask for overtime pay from our manor master OU." He Tianshu seemed to be in a good mood and didn't mind Zhong Xiaohua's witty words. He said, "Let's go, Zhong Xiaohua. Let's go to the forest where you practice your fist. I'll first explain the basics of ethereal steps to you." When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, he happily said, "Captain He, you've mastered the first level." He Tianshu proudly said, "Is there a need to say?" No matter what, Captain He is still considered an outstanding figure in Misty School. "He, is that so?" Zhong Xiaohua asked with a smile. He Tianshu frowned and said, "Don't waste time. Let's go. After I teach you, I still need to look at the contents." When Zhong Xiaohua followed He Tianshu to the forest, He Tianshu explained to Zhong Xiaohua what he had learned from the past few days in detail. As it turned out, ethereal steps qigong was different from other qigong techniques. It was only a kind of technique, a kind of footwork and the application of internal energy. The reason why He Tianshu used such a long time to cultivate was not only to learn the techniques of ethereal steps, but more importantly, to change his previous qigong techniques, adding his understanding of ethereal steps into his current techniques. After He Tianshu finished explaining, Zhong Xiaohua pondered for a long time. Just as she was about to speak, He Tianshu beat her to it and said, "You don't understand, right? It's okay, I'll explain it to you again." After saying that, he was about to explain it a second time. Zhong Xiaohua hurriedly said, "No, Captain He, I understand. I just want you to demonstrate it to me." He Tianshu didn't dare to believe his ears and asked again, "Really? You really understood it? This is something that I've been thinking about for a few days. You understood it all at once?" Zhong Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "Yes, Captain He, I think I really understand it. Please add it to your collection, thank you." Chapter 155. He Tianshu still had the awareness of a master. He confirmed again and again in a responsible manner, "Do you really understand it?" Zhong Xiaohua nodded her head vigorously, "Captain He, I'm sure, definitely. I really understand it. I'm just waiting for you to demonstrate it to me." He Tianshu saw that Zhong Xiaohua was so certain, but he was still doubtful. He demonstrated the first level of ethereal steps to Zhong Xiaohua in the forest and taught her the incantation to use her inner strength. After Zhong Xiaohua saw it, she naturally couldn't use the incantation to use her inner strength, but she could imitate the movement. She imitated it right in front of He Tianshu. He Tianshu, who had once taught Zhong Xiaohua fist techniques, naturally had a direct understanding of Zhong Xiaohua's martial arts aptitude. He never thought that he would be able to teach Zhong Xiaohua in a single morning. He had already made sufficient mental preparations. But the reality before his eyes made He Tianshu's jaw drop. Although the movement that Zhong Xiaohua imitated for the first time was clumsy and unfamiliar, her posture, angle, and footwork were all correct. He Tianshu even suspected that Zhong Xiaohua had secretly practiced the ethereal steps before teaching him. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua looking at him, He Tianshu was speechless. Her movement was very correct and incomparably precise. If it wasn't for the fact that Zhong Xiaohua didn't have any inner strength, he would have been able to fly high. Seeing He Tianshu looking at her with hidden bitterness, Zhong Xiaohua suddenly had goosebumps. She carefully asked, "Captain He, what's wrong? I was wrong, right? Please demonstrate again." "I'm sorry." He Tianshu blinked and said, "There's no need." Zhong Xiaohua hurriedly went up and considerately said, "Captain He, you must be tired. Take a rest first. Do you want me to pour you some water? After you've rested, you can demonstrate again." He Tianshu waved his hand unhappily and said, "There's no need. You've practiced very well. Really, practice a few more times." Hearing this, Zhong Xiaohua couldn't believe his ears. "Really? Am I practicing it correctly?" Seeing He Tianshu nod his head, Zhong Xiaohua was ecstatic. This was the first time since she started practicing martial arts that she had learned it so quickly. Could it be that she had become smarter? Striking while the iron was hot, Zhong Xiaohua practiced a few more times and became even more proficient. Moreover, her body became even lighter, as though she was about to float and fly. Zhong Xiaohua became excited from practicing and actually dashed into the depths of the forest. He Tianshu was even more dumbstruck. Could it be that the ethereal steps was tailor-made for Zhong Xiaohua? He didn't even have a foundation in internal energy yet, but he was able to perform it so well. There was a hint of qigong between his steps. How long had it been since he started practicing? He knew Zhong Xiaohua's foundation. It must be her first time coming into contact with qigong. Just as he was lost in thought, he heard a scream from the forest. "Ouch, I can't stop myself. Team leader He, save me." He Tianshu's heart turned cold. Moving his feet, he executed ethereal steps and dashed into the depths of the forest. The scene in front of him made him laugh heartily. Zhong Xiaohua was stuck to a tree like a dead fish as she slowly slid down. He Tianshu walked forward lightly and helped Zhong Xiaohua up before asking her in detail. It turned out that Zhong Xiaohua's qigong practice was so exciting that she was shuttling through the forest. Her steps were light and quick, as though she was flying on the grass. However, due to the lack of internal energy, She was unable to push her body into the air. But the technique of using inertia in ethereal steps was extraordinary. Zhong Xiaohua's speed was getting faster and faster. She had never experienced such speed before, and not long after, she lost control of her steps and body. Seeing that she was about to crash into a tree not far away, she had no choice but to cry for help. Unfortunately, He Tianshu was deep in thought and didn't pay attention to her. Hence, Zhong Xiaohua could only make the closest physical contact with the tree in front of her. Hearing this, He Tianshu found it funny. Thinking back to when he had just started practicing Qigong, wasn't it the same? He had even fallen from a tree before. He Tianshu helped Zhong Xiaohua wipe off the mud on her body before explaining in detail the things she needed to take note of when using Qigong, as well as some necessary techniques. Zhong Xiaohua naturally listened attentively to her pain. He Tianshu, who was speaking with assurance, had unconsciously neglected the fact that Zhong Xiaohua was actually able to crash into the tree's height without internal energy. After a few days, Zhong Xiaohua's Qigong had become proficient. This was something He Tianshu had not expected. For him to be able to learn such miraculous Qigong, he was naturally grateful to Zhong Xiaohua. As mentioned earlier, he had prepared himself with great courage to face Zhong Xiaohua's aptitude. However, the truth had greatly exceeded his expectations. Not only did Zhong Xiaohua learn and comprehend the ethereal steps he had imparted, even the Qigong techniques that he had imparted, Zhong Xiaohua was able to grasp them in one go. She was even able to comprehend them by analogy. This really left He Tianshu scratching his head. Could it be that this brat was born to run? Thinking back to the hardships he had suffered in order to learn Qigong, He Tianshu was almost doubting who had the worst aptitude. He Tianshu now really wanted to teach Zhong Xiaohua some internal cultivation techniques. He wanted to see how Qigong would be like after she learned internal energy. Would she be able to reach the level of 10,000 miles seeking plum blossom? Of course, there was another thing that left He Tianshu astonished. Zhong Xiaohua's lightness when she executed her movement techniques, as well as some inexplicable trajectories, had given He Tianshu some inspiration. This was something that Zhong Xiaohua had casually executed, and not something that He Tianshu had imparted to her. These inspirations had helped He Tianshu gain a deeper understanding of ethereal steps. He had originally thought that he had already mastered the first level of ethereal steps, but when he saw the highlights in Zhong Xiaohua's footwork, he realized that there were still many things that could be studied. Hence, He Tianshu delayed his cultivation progress and did not immediately begin cultivating the second level of ethereal steps. On one hand, it was the rapid improvement of ethereal steps. Zhong Xiaohua was overjoyed. On the other hand, it was the cultivation of the Heart Sutra. She did not take a single step forward. Sigh, it was truly a combination of ice and fire. On this day, Zhong Xiaohua had finished practicing her fist and sword techniques in the forest. After playing around with her Qigong for a while, she slowly walked back to the small courtyard. Before she reached the small round gate, she saw two people who looked like guards standing at the entrance of the courtyard. Zhong Xiaohua was puzzled. Guards rarely came here. Could it be that something had happened? When she reached the small round gate, she saw the two guards standing there. On the small stone bench in the courtyard, there was another person sitting there. Upon closer inspection, it was Li Jinfeng, Li Dashu. Li Jinfeng was sitting on the stone bench and was bored from waiting. When he heard footsteps, he turned around and saw Zhong Xiaohua. He smiled and stood up. Zhong Xiaohua was also pleasantly surprised. The last time she saw Li Jinfeng was a year ago. In the blink of an eye, a few months had passed. She happily ran forward and pulled Li Jinfeng's hand. She said, "Brother Li, why are you here? It's been a long time." Li Jinfeng was also happy. He looked at his cheap initiate disciple. After not seeing him for a few months, he had grown a lot. His eyes were clearer, without the confusion and curiosity of the first time they met. He could not help touching Zhong Xiaohua's head and said, "Why didn't you go to the academy to see me? I didn't want to miss you, so I took the time to come out." Seeing that Zhong Xiaohua and Li Jinfeng were familiar with each other, the two guards next to the courtyard gate walked forward. After carefully asking about Zhong Xiaohua's identity and even what was written on the pen, they nodded and left with ease. When the two guards walked away, Zhong Xiaohua quickly pulled Li Jinfeng into the room. She poured a cup of water for him and then chatted with him. Li Jinfeng asked curiously, "Xiaohua, what's going on with your Huanxi manor? After the new year, I went to the Lotus escort agency to find Zhong Xiaohu. I heard that he went on a long journey and couldn't find him. I guessed that you must be in the manor, so I came to find you. However, the number of guards in your manor is much more than before. I told them many times that I've been here before and that I'm familiar with you. I also said that I know Captain He, but they didn't let me in. I was almost anxious with them. I wanted them to tell you that even if I didn't go in, it's fine to let you out, but they didn't let me in. Don't you think it's infuriating?" What could Zhong Xiaohua say? She just smiled and said, "It's nothing. It's just the new year, so the manor has tightened the security. I'm afraid that something will happen." Li Jinfeng was still puzzled and said, "But they didn't have to let you see me. It's really outrageous. As the saying goes, a scholar can't reason with a soldier. Even if I had 10 mouths, I still wouldn't be able to win against them." Zhong Xiaohua laughed and didn't say anything. She thought that great scholar Li must have been angry because he was not allowed to enter the manor last time. She heard him continue to nag, "That's right, today is the same. Why did they suddenly let 2 people follow me? Last time when I came with your second brother, we just registered and came in alone. This time, I have to see them in person." No matter what Li Jinfeng said, Zhong Xiaohua only said perfunctorily, "This tight security is just for our safety. If it wasn't tight, wouldn't it be terrible if a thief came in? That's reasonable. The day before yesterday, our academy lost a lot of books." Li Jinfeng scratched his head and said, "You say, of all the things to steal, why not? Why did they have to steal books? Although scholars stealing books can't be called stealing, it's still a disgrace to the educated." Zhong Xiaohua was stunned and asked, "If scholars stealing books can't be called stealing, then what can it be called?" "Stealing books." Li Jinfeng seemed to be ashamed of Zhong Xiaohua's ignorance. "Phut!" Zhong Xiaohua spat out the tea that she had just drunk, almost spitting it on Li Jinfeng. She asked in confusion, What's the difference?" "Educated. This is the educated's elegance and dignity," Li Jinfeng said righteously. Zhong Xiaohua was speechless. Li Jinfeng took a sip of tea and remembered something. He asked, "That's right, Xiaohua, I went to the escort agency to look for your second brother. I heard that he's no longer working there. When I asked the guard called Xiao Sai, he was so secretive and didn't tell me anything. He just said that he's looking for a better job. I found it strange. Why can't he tell me where he's going? Do you know where Zhong Xiaohu went? If it's not possible, I'll go look for the teachers in the academy and see if they can find a better place for him." Hey! Zhong Xiaohua was a little puzzled. It was an honor for the Lotus Flower Escort Agency that Zhong Xiaohu could be a disciple of the Misty School. She didn't know why the guard was so tight-lipped about it. However, Li Jinfeng seemed to have misunderstood the guard's intentions. He thought that something had happened to Zhong Xiaohu and that he had been chased out by the escort agency. Hearing that Li Jinfeng was so concerned about finding a job for her second brother, Zhong Xiaohua felt warmth in her heart. She had to admit that this young master Li Jinfeng was a warm-hearted person. She and her brother were not related to him at all. They were just traveling together on the way to Pingyang City. Not only did he visit them frequently, he even taught them how to read and write. He was truly their first teacher. On the other hand, Shang Guanyun and Yu Lun from the Lotus Escort Agency had also arrived at Pingyang City in the same carriage. Their attitudes were completely different from his. With this comparison, it was obvious who was better. Could Zhong Xiaohua not feel close to them? At the thought of this, Zhong Xiaohua said, "Brother Li, don't worry. My second brother is doing very well now. He's just gone to a place to practice martial arts. He's very happy." "Oh yes, can you guess where he went?" Seeing that Zhong Xiaohua did not look nervous, Li Jinfeng guessed that she was not worried about Zhong Xiaohu. He thought for a while and said, How would I know about you martial arts practitioners? I think I heard you mention before that he was going to the martial arts center of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. Why did he change to another place? I can't guess. He can't possibly be going to that Misty school that you mentioned. Zhong Xiaohua laughed even more when she heard this. She said, Brother Li is really a smart person. You guessed it so quickly. Hey! Li Jinfeng was a little surprised. He continued, Congratulations, congratulations. I really didn't expect your second brother to have such a fortuitous encounter. I heard from you that it's very difficult to enter that school. Moreover, when I returned to the academy, I also asked the local students. They said that the school only accepts children around 5 years old. Your second brother is definitely not 15 years old. Zhong Xiaohua smiled and explained, it's also because of fate that second brother met an old friend. That person saw that second brother's aptitude was very good and took pity on him. That's why he accepted him into the school. Good aptitude? Li Jinfeng said in surprise, Zhong Xiaohua, I remember that your aptitude is even more extraordinary. Why didn't they choose you? Zhong Xiaohua pouted and said, I can read and write, but once I practice martial arts, I'll become a completely different person. Just like before, there's no other way. Ha ha. Li Jinfeng also knew about the embarrassing incident of Zhong Xiaohua practicing martial arts. He smiled and did not ask further. Zhong Xiaohua asked again, Brother Li, where did you spend the new year? Don't tell me you also stayed in Pingyang City. Hearing this, Li Jinfeng smiled mysteriously and said, Although I went to the escort agency and Lai Mountain Villa to look for you after the new year, I spent the new year in Lu Town. You're back home, Brother Li. Zhong Xiaohua was very excited to hear news of her hometown. She continued to ask, Is everyone at home well? Anne. Although Zhong Xiaohua did not finish her sentence, Li Jinfeng knew what she meant. He smiled and said, My family is very good. Your family is also very good. Really? Zhong Xiaohua could not believe her ears. It had been more than a year since she left the Guozhuang house. Usually, when she saw him practicing martial arts and reading, he did not seem to be homesick. However, he was still a teenager after all. How could he not be homesick just because he wanted to? She remembered that when she went to the Lotus Escort Agency last year, she wanted second brother to bring his monthly allowance home. After that, she encountered so many things and forgot about the money. She vaguely remembered that second brother seemed to have said that he wanted Li Jinfeng to help him bring a message and money back when he went back for the new year. Second brother had already left the Lotus Escort Agency before the new year, so he probably did not fulfill this request. At the thought of this, Zhong Xiaohua quickly took out the money pouch in her arms and said, Brother Li, I have some money here. Why don't you take it first and help me bring it back the next time you go back? Hearing this, Li Jinfeng quickly stopped her and said, Don't, Zhong Xiaohua, put it away first. It's still too early for me to go back home. I don't even know when the next time I go back will be. Who knows, maybe you will go back before me. Oh, so it's like that. Zhong Xiaohua helplessly took back the money pouch and said, If Brother Li has a chance to come back, you must let us know first, okay? Li Jinfeng said, That's for sure. Didn't I go back before the new year to find you first? However, your second brother went out to run the Lotus Escort Agency, so I didn't see him. Luckily, your second brother was careful and left the money that should be brought back. I already gave it to your parents the last time I went back. Is that so? That's great. Oh right, Brother Li, quickly tell me about my family. Zhong Xiaohua was somewhat impatient to hear news about her family. Well, I heard from your parents that there didn't seem to be any changes when they left with you. Hee hee. Li Jinfeng was obviously not a very good descriptor. Zhong Xiaohua did not give up and said, Then just say whatever you want. Li Jinfeng thought about it and said, That's right, your father and mother look very young. I think my father and mother should be about the same age as your father and mother. Why do they look 10 years younger than my father and mother? Is that so? That can't be. I remember that when I was born, my parents also looked very normal. Chapter 156. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua's sad appearance, Li Jinfeng immediately acted like a child who had made a mistake. He rubbed his hands in embarrassment and said, "This, Xiaohua, really, how do I say this? I don't know where your grandmother's grave is and I haven't paid my respects." When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, she forced a smile and said, "It's okay, Brother Li. I was too impatient. I suddenly heard news about my family and wanted to know more." Then she said sadly, "Grandmother has already been gone for a year. Thinking about it, that day seems like yesterday. Brother Li is a guest from afar and isn't very familiar with our family. Father and mother naturally wouldn't tell you these things. If they really did ask you to pay your respects, it would definitely be neglectful." Li Jinfeng scratched his head and said, "Yes, I don't think I saw anything black and white at home, so I didn't think in that direction. If I had met you two when I returned home before the new year and you two reminded me, I might have been able to help you take a look." Then he said, "Your eldest brother seems to know what's on your mind. He told me to tell you that you don't have to worry about the land on the hillside. He helped you look after it well. That land seems to be very fertile and has already been harvested. The harvest is a bit higher than other lands." When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, she was slightly happy and said, "Really? I opened up that land bit by bit. It's not a waste of my hard work to have such a good harvest." "That's right. Also, your family's harvest last year was very good. It's enough for this year's consumption. Your father went to Lu Town to sell a lot before the new year and really made a lot of money. Hee hee." When Zhong Xiaohua heard about her family's wealth, she was naturally happy. Li Jinfeng thought for a moment and then said, "As for your eldest brother's child, I haven't seen him. Looking at your sister-in-law, she doesn't seem to be pregnant either. The two of them have been married for a year. Why don't they work harder?" Zhong Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a little indignant when she thought of hugging her little nephew. Li Jinfeng was amused when he heard this. He flicked Zhong Xiaohua's head and said with a smile, "Why are you in such a hurry? I see that your brother and sister-in-law have a good relationship. It's only a matter of time before they have a child in the family." Zhong Xiaohua rubbed her aching head and said with grievance, "I'm also concerned about the next generation of the Zhong family. Learning martial arts should start from a young age. I can't let my little nephew lose at the starting line. I also have to plan for a rainy day." "Don't, you should practice your martial arts first." Li Jinfeng was a bit speechless and said, "How can you be in charge of educating children? Moreover, don't you have old Master Liu in your family? He's a man of great knowledge. Under his influence, I reckon that your future in literature will be better than your half-baked martial arts." "That's right, this old Master Liu is really amazing. As the ancients say, there are sages in the world who live in seclusion in the mountains. I didn't think so. This time I went to your family and talked with this old Master Liu. Only then did I know that this saying was true. Old Mr. Liu's knowledge isn't any worse than the old pedants of our academy. I really admire you." "Is that so? I just found out." Zhong Xiaohua said proudly, "My sister-in-law's father is naturally amazing. Moreover, my sister-in-law's knowledge is also very good. In the past, I didn't spend much time with her and didn't realize it. But in that short period of time, my sister-in-law gave me a lot of advice. I firmly remembered many of her words in my heart. Now that I've read books and compared them with what she said, I found that those words were penetrating insights." Li Jinfeng felt a wave of yearning and said sadly, "Like father, like daughter. It's probably like that. It's a pity that I didn't talk much with your sister-in-law and didn't experience her elegance." "That's right. Does your sister-in-law have a younger sister?" Zhong Xiaohua rolled her eyes and said, "She doesn't have a direct younger sister. But, she has a younger cousin." "Is that so?" Li Jinfeng's eyes lit up and asked, "What's her name? Does she have an engagement?" Zhong Xiaohua said, "Her name is Liu Yeye. She lives in Barley Valley. As for an engagement, how would I know? Next time when you go back, you can ask around. But, I have to tell you in advance." Li Jinfeng said blankly, "What are you trying to say?" Zhong Xiaohua smiled strangely and said, "Sister Yeye doesn't seem to be as beautiful as Sister Qiu Tong. Also, Mr. Liu's younger brother is a butcher who slaughters pigs. He's very fierce to people. When Li Jinfeng heard this, he looked around and said seriously, Xiaohua, you misunderstood me. I'm just concerned about you and want to know more about your living environment. Whether or not Miss Liu Yeye is beautiful, what does it have to do with me? Don't you think so? Oh yes, your sister-in-law is so beautiful. There's no reason that her younger cousin can't even compare to Qiu Tong. It's really strange. Looking at Li Jinfeng's expression, Zhong Xiaohua was a little amused. She continued to ask, Brother Li, don't think about other things. Tell me more about your family. Li Jinfeng continued, that's right, the money that your second brother gave me, I gave it all to your parents. When they received the money, they were so happy that tears fell from their eyes. They only kept saying, child has grown up, child has grown up. I knew that there was also your monthly allowance in it, so I told them. But I didn't know that it was better if I didn't say it. They cried even more when they heard it. Zhong Xiaohua also felt a little sad. I saw that they missed you, so I told them about the interesting stories of you practicing martial arts and learning how to read and write. Only then did they feel more at ease. Oh right, I didn't tell them about your injuries. I thought that if I told them, they would definitely rush to Pingyang City overnight to drag you back. Haha, how's your right hand now? Don't let them see any clues when you go back. Zhong Xiaohua raised her right hand and made a few flexing and stretching movements nimbly. She said, it's already fine. I should be able to recover after some time. I believe that father and mother won't be able to tell. Li Jinfeng nodded and said, Old Master Liu was also very happy to hear that you were enlightened. They even asked why you didn't write a letter home since you could read and write now. I could only say that I left in a hurry and didn't meet with you. At this point, Li Jinfeng took out a letter from his chest and handed it to Zhong Xiaohua with a smile. He said, your sister-in-law wrote this for you. Zhong Xiaohua snatched it over and scolded, Brother Li, why did you only take it out now? Li Jinfeng chuckled and said, good things only appear at the most crucial time. Zhong Xiaohua couldn't wait to open the unsealed letter. There were several pages full of beautiful handwriting. When Zhong Xiaohua read it carefully, it was written in the tone of her parents. It must be the result of a collaboration between the family. The letter contained trivial matters of the family and the village. More importantly, it contained her parents' reminders and longing for the two of them. Zhong Xiaohua's heart warmed when she read it. As the saying goes, a letter from home is worth 10,000 pieces of gold. It was true. Zhong Xiaohua finished reading it carefully and kept it carefully in her chest. Just when she was about to speak, Li Jinfeng spoke and said solemnly, also, Zhong Xiaohua, your parents asked me to pass a message to you and your second brother. Zhong Xiaohua was stunned and asked, what message can't they say in a letter? Li Jinfeng nodded and said, your parents asked me to personally tell you that if you don't mix well in the city and get bullied, go back to the Guozhuang house. Your parents will always be at home waiting for you to come back. Hearing such simple words, Zhong Xiaohua's eyes immediately blurred. He nodded desperately and said, I know, Brother Li. Thank you. When Zhong Xiaohua's mood calmed down a little, he cheerfully said, let's go, Brother Li. Let's go find my second brother. He must also want to know about the family. However, as soon as Zhong Xiaohua ran out of the hut, she stopped. She had been to the Misty School once, but it was taken by Ouyang Yang through the inner courtyard of the Huanxi Villa. She knew that it must be Ouyang Yang's special passage, and she might not be able to use it. But if she and Li Jinfeng directly went in through the front door of the Misty Mountain Villa, would the guards let her in? This was really a problem. Suddenly, Zhong Xiaohua patted the back of her head and smiled. There was a disciple of the Misty School next to her. She could just open her mouth and ask. Zhong Xiaohua moved to the door of He Tianshu's room. The door was not closed and was half open. He Tianshu in the room held his chin with one hand and seemed to be thinking. Zhong Xiaohua went to the door and knocked on the door frame, but it didn't arouse He Tianshu's attention. She had no choice but to go in directly. Only when she was in front of He Tianshu did he wake up. Zhong Xiaohua frowned and said, Captain He, is this the awareness of a martial arts expert? Isn't it said that after practicing martial arts to a certain extent, one's eyes and ears will be alert? I'm already in front of you, and you only noticed it now? He Tianshu still looked dispirited as he replied, there is such a saying. It is to be able to sense movements within a certain range. However, I am still far from reaching that level. Moreover, you see, this footwork is really hard to understand. I have practiced it many times, but it has no effect. With that said, he wanted to pass the ethereal steps cultivation technique to him. Zhong Xiaohua waved his hand and said, Captain I'll leave this kind of profound research to you. Once you've comprehended it, you can teach me. When He Tianshu heard this, he took back the technique and asked in puzzlement, then why did you run away? Zhong Xiaohua then told him that she wanted to go to the Misty School to look for her second brother. When He Tianshu heard this, he smiled and said, that's easy. You don't have to worry about the small paths in the inner courtyard. It seems that Mingsue Hall's Hall Master Qin has never walked by himself. I usually go through the front door when I go back. However, I have the Misty School's token. You can go to the guard of Huanxi Manor to get another token. Take that to the side door of Ethereal Manor. It should be able to be used. But I'm not alone. Li Jinfeng and brother Li want to go with me to see my second brother. The Huanxi Manor's token can only be used by one person. You can't bring anyone. Then what should I do? Zhong Xiaohua was depressed. Li Jinfeng had come all the way to his house to take the money that he and his brother had saved. He had even sent a letter to him just to see Zhong Xiaohu. His request wasn't too high, right? How could he not satisfy this request of his? He Tianshu asked, Li Jinfeng? Is he the scholar who came to see you with your second brother last time? Yes. Zhong Xiaohua answered honestly. Well, I happen to want to have a rest. Why don't I take you there? My token can only take one person. After that, He Tianshu stretched and stood up. Zhong Xiaohua was overjoyed. He Tianshu went out and greeted Li Jinfeng. Then he took the two people to Ethereal Manor. How can the disciples be convinced? He Tianshu cried out in surprise. He turned around and saw that Zhong Xiaohua's face was also full of anger. He said, Brother, how can there be such a rumor? I know about the matter of Zhong Xiaohu entering our Misty School. It doesn't seem like what you're saying. Hey, it's not like this. That person also felt strange and said, You actually know the specific situation? What is going on? However, even if you know the truth now, it's useless. All kinds of rumors have already spread throughout the Misty School. I don't know which version is true and which is false. Maybe what you heard is also false. What I said is absolutely true. I was there at the time. He Tianshu said solemnly. Come on, brother. It's obvious that you're lying. That person was a little disapproving as he waved his hand and said, Zhong Xiaohu's entry into the ethereal sect was personally decided by the sect master in the meeting hall. What qualifications do you have to enter the meeting hall? He Tianshu was speechless. That guard's words were really reasonable. If he didn't want to be Zhong Xiaohua's master, how could he have the qualifications to enter the sect leader's office? This kind of thing couldn't be explained clearly to others. He Tianshu could only pat that guard's shoulder and said, Brother, public opinion can melt gold. Some things aren't as simple as you think. I can't explain the specifics to you. Since you told me the truth just now, I'll give you a piece of advice. Since this matter involves the sect leader, it's naturally better not to talk about it. That guard thoughtfully nodded. He Tianshu then brought Zhong Xiaohua and Li Jinfeng, who had finished their registration, into the archway and walked towards the entrance of the villa. Just as they passed the archway, Zhong Xiaohua couldn't help but say to He Tianshu, Captain how can they say such nonsense? My second brother was able to enter the Misty School because sect leader OU personally agreed to it. How can they say such nonsense? He Tianshu smiled bitterly and said, Zhong Xiaohua, in this place where there are only people, there will be jianghu and conflicts. Think about it, Being sect leader OU's direct disciple is a position that any Misty School disciple would covet. Zhong Xiaohu isn't a disciple that was trained from a young age. His sudden appearance naturally makes people jealous. If your second brother can't even deal with this setback, I believe that sect leader will look down on him. Please add it to your collection, thank you. Chapter 157. Zhong Xiaohua fell silent when she heard that. She only wanted her second brother to enter the Misty School so that he could get rid of the bloodthirsty life of the armed escort agency. She also wanted him to practice martial arts at the same time. She didn't have any other extravagant requests. When Wenhai only accepted her as his disciple out of good intentions and because of their previous relationship, it could be considered a coincidence. However, in the eyes of others, all these good things were just firewood for jealousy. They could only make people lose their heads and reject this shallow village boy from the bottom of their hearts. At this moment, Zhong Xiaohua deeply felt that the human heart was the most unpredictable thing in the world. Even the Misty School, which was regarded as a sacred place in her heart, couldn't be free from vulgarity. She didn't know if it was right or wrong for her to push her second brother into the teeth of the storm. Just a moment ago, she was still lively and happy. Now, she was a little gloomy. Fortune and misfortune depend on each other. The ancients didn't lie. The attentive Li Jinfeng had long sensed Zhong Xiaohua's abnormal behavior. He smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Xiaohua, don't worry too much about it. After all, they don't know the secret behind this, so it's inevitable that they won't speculate. It's not uncommon to see groundless accusations in this world. You must learn to be calm. This is the best touchstone for right and wrong, and it's the best way to hone a person's temperament. Once you've experienced enough, you'll naturally learn to be calm. A trivial matter is better than reading 10,000 books. If you're stuck in a pile of old books, who can grow well? Zhong Xiaohua forced a smile and said, I know, Brother Li. I'm just a little uncomfortable. I can't believe that doing something like this for my second brother will cause so many people to gossip. If they say this in front of Captain He, who knows what they'll say behind my back? Li Jinfeng smiled and stopped trying to persuade him. This kind of thing depended on one's own understanding. It was useless to say more. Zhong Xiaohua was only a teenager. It was good that he could have such thoughts. If he could see through people's hearts and remain indifferent, it would be strange. When He Tianshu heard this, he chuckled and said, Zhong Xiaohua, you're thinking too much. They're just saying that the grapes are sour because they can't eat them. This kind of matter involves the gang leader, so it's not up to them to criticize. I just want to satisfy my craving. I don't dare to say anything more. Don't worry. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees more clearly than the player is confused. Zhong Xiaohua also knows this truth, but she still can't let it go. Behind the decorated archway was a huge square, facing a main door with carved beams and painted pillars. The door was tightly shut. He Tianshu led the two of them to the side door as he explained, this main door is usually only used by the gang leader or the distinguished guests of the gang. Usually, people in the gang go through the side doors. Li Jinfeng nodded and said, I've already read about these rules in books. I thought they were outdated. In this era where the times keep up with the times, perhaps you won't see them. It's commendable that your gang still retains such an ancient style. He Tianshu smiled and said, Brother Li, you're a scholar, so of course you're full of vigor. We martial artists follow the old rules and are content with the ancient customs. This kind of rule is not uncommon in the martial arts world. After a long time, you'll know. Li Jinfeng cupped his hands and said, I've learned. As the two talked, Zhong Xiaohua was absent-minded. The three of them walked for a while and came to a lush place. He Tianshu stopped and said, This is where the gang leader and the disciples of the elders live. As for where Zhong Xiaohu lives, we'll have to ask to find out. While they were talking, a young man with a face as bright as the moon and an arrogant expression walked out from the door of an abode. He Tianshu quickly went up and cupped his hands and said, I'm He Tianshu from the pharmacy hall. I'm here to visit Brother Wen Wenhai's new disciple, Zhong Xiaohu. May I know where he lives? Brother, can you tell me a little? That person already had an unapproachable expression. After hearing He Tianshu's words, he frowned as if he had seen a fly. He reluctantly returned the greeting and impatiently pointed to the left and said, 50 steps forward. The one with the small tree in front of the door is him. Without waiting for He Tianshu to thank him, he flicked his sleeves and walked away. As he walked, he muttered, another group of snobs. Can't they just practice martial arts? They always want to walk the unorthodox path. Looks like I'll have to find someone to put up a sign over there. For no reason, I've become a guide a few times these past few days. He Tianshu looked at that person's behavior and was also confused. He had asked him for directions in a proper manner and had never been rude. Why was he so cold? The three of them walked forward and saw a small tree in front of a courtyard. Zhong Xiaohua quickly walked forward and knocked on the door. After a while, Zhong Xiaohu's voice came from inside the door, Zhong Xiaohu isn't here. He went to the training ground to practice martial arts. Zhong Xiaohua was stunned. She dug her ears and shouted in surprise, second brother, I'm Xiaohua. I heard your voice. How did you go to the training ground? Immediately, a surprised voice came from inside, haha, Xiaohua, wait a moment. The door opened with a sound. The person who stuck his head out was Zhong Xiaohu. When he saw the three of them in front of the door, he was very happy. He quickly let them in and then carefully looked outside. After confirming that there was no one, he closed the door of the courtyard. He Tianshu and the other two stood beside Zhong Xiaohu. Looking at his series of strange actions, they were very puzzled. Zhong Xiaohua even asked, second brother, what are you doing? How much do you owe him? Zhong Xiaohu turned around and smiled bitterly, sit inside. I'll tell you the details later. This was a rather exquisite small courtyard. There was an open space in the corner where martial arts equipment such as weapons and stone locks were placed. The layout of the courtyard was similar to that of the Huanxi Mountain Villa, with a stone table and stone stools. Now that the weather was mild, the four of them sat in the courtyard. Zhong Xiaohu poured tea for everyone and then began to talk. Zhong Xiaohua was the first to ask impatiently, second brother, what's going on? Do you really owe him a debt? Zhong Xiaohu glared at him and said, when did you see your second brother owing someone money? Zhong Xiaohua stuck out his tongue and said, then you were sneaking around just now. It was like the father of Dumbo in our village who owed someone money. Zhong Xiaohu smiled bitterly and said, I was forced to do this. He Tianshu asked, Zhong Xiaohu, since you can be apprenticed to senior brother Wen, you're the direct disciple of Grandmaster Ou. Who can force you? Zhong Xiaohu said helplessly, it's because I'm the direct disciple of Grandmaster Ou that it's like this. Seeing that everyone was surprised, Zhong Xiaohu took a sip of water and explained, that day in the meeting hall, I was accepted as a disciple by Master. After that, I went through the apprenticeship ceremony and was arranged to live in this small courtyard. He Tianshu interrupted and said, TSK, there's really a difference in treatment. When I first entered the sect, I lived in a small room with a few people. When I was promoted and became an adult, I was still in a room with 2 people. You just entered the sect and you're already living alone in a small courtyard. It's really a world of difference. No wonder everyone wants to be a direct disciple. Zhong Xiaohu said, Martial Uncle please don't mock me. I'd rather live in a room with a few people. Not long after I moved here, a few people came to visit. I didn't understand what was going on, so I warmly welcomed them. However, they didn't say anything and just talked about this and that. I could only accompany them. However, they didn't sit for long before more people came. My small courtyard was full of people the whole day. When more people came, I realized that they were trying to worm their way into being friends with me. They wanted to build a good relationship with me and see if I could give them some benefits. You tell me, isn't it like a chicken talking to a duck? I was able to enter Master's tutelage because of Xiaohua's blessing. I couldn't tell them this, so they just thought I had some secret method and wanted to inquire about it. Many people gave me some jaw-dropping conditions, so I could only decline. However, The more I declined, the more they thought I was in control and the more they pestered me. He Tianshu listened and couldn't help curling his lips. He was also a representative in this misty school. He thought that as long as he was good at martial arts, everything was good. He neglected the ways of the world and only focused on practicing martial arts. Although he was successful in martial arts now, he had become a person that no one loved. That was why he was sent to Huanxi Mountain Villa. Now that he heard other people's methods of currying favor, other than looking up to them, there was nothing else left in his heart. Zhong Xiaohu continued, so, on the second day, when I saw that the crowd was still there, I pretended to go to Master's place to practice martial arts. Only then did I hide out. When everyone left, I secretly came back. The first time I saw a teacher of the academy make a deal with someone for power and money, I was also depressed for a few days. Later on, I understood that teachers are also mortals. Mortals have their own selfish desires. It is normal for them to do some shady business. Zhong Xiaohua also copied He Tianshu and let out a long breath and said, I finally understand what it means to be unsullied out of the mud. If there is no mud, how can there be unsullied nobility? Soon after, Zhong Xiaohua seemed to remember something and asked, That's right, second brother. When we were at the memorial archway just now, we heard the guards talking about you. When Zhong Xiaohu heard this, he still smiled bitterly and said, I know. When I go out on a normal day, I also hear people talking about you. They don't know that they are talking about me, so naturally they don't have any misgivings. It seems that the status of a direct disciple of the big gang leader is really not ordinary. Not only are there many people who want to take advantage of the situation, there are also many people who look down on me, a disciple who came out of nowhere. They think that I am only able to have such good fortune because of others. Hearing this, Zhong Xiaohua was a little embarrassed and said, Second brother, you have to blame me for this. I didn't discuss it with you beforehand, so you are now in a dilemma. It's really my fault. Zhong Xiaohu looked at Zhong Xiaohua with a smile and said, It's okay, Xiaohua. I know that you gave me such a good opportunity to practice martial arts for second brother's sake. Wasn't I so happy at that time that I was dumbfounded? How could I think so much? Second brother can't thank you enough, so how could I blame you? People who look up at the starry sky are not just admiring the beauty of the night sky. Perhaps some people are having nosebleeds. It's better to be down to earth. Moreover, I will walk my own path and let others talk about me. I will walk my own path of martial arts. Who cares about what others think? As long as I work hard and achieve results, these rumors will naturally disappear. He Tianshu clapped and said, Zhong Xiaohu, what you said is very good. You have great potential. No wonder junior brother Wen took a fancy to you. Martial uncle uses tea in place of wine to congratulate you in advance on your success in the Misty School. Thus, the four of them each raised their teacups and drank it in one gulp. After putting down the teacups, Zhong Xiaohu mysteriously said to Zhong Xiaohua, Xiaohua, wait here. Second brother will bring you something good. After he finished speaking, he walked into the room. Not long after, he came out with a small booklet and handed it to Zhong Xiaohua. He said, Here, Xiaohua. This is the Neigong Heart Sutra that I especially asked Master for you. Zhong Xiaohua was shocked and immediately stood up from the stone bench. She quickly waved her hands and said, Second brother, I can't accept this, I can't accept this. Didn't I already take a copy of the Carefree Heart Sutra from the library? I can't take anything from your Misty School. Isn't this asking you to misplace it? Zhong Xiaohu smiled and said, Master already told me about the Carefree Heart Sutra. Xiaohua, you really are amazing. There are so many Neigong Heart Sutras in the library, so why did you choose that one? It's because of this that I asked Master for help. Actually, it's not as you think. There aren't any mistakes to be made. This reckless bull force is just a simple Neigong from another sect. Although you can't find it outside, it's not worth a single cent in the Misty School. Don't worry and just take it. Master gave his approval and I took it from his study. Zhong Xiaohua looked at the thin secret book and asked tentatively, Second brother, is it really okay to take this reckless bull force ? Zhong Xiaohu raised his hand and threw it into her arms. He laughed and scolded, "If you say it's okay, then it's okay. Look at you. You clearly want to take it, but you're afraid it'll burn your hand." Zhong Xiaohua reached out and caught it. She giggled and said, "I'm just afraid you'll make a mistake. I heard that the rules of the Misty School are very strict. You can't just let anyone practice any Neigong Heart Sutra." He Tianshu also felt a wave of envy. He said, "Direct disciples are really different. Even if I want to see these Heart Sutras, I have to ask the elders. You guys can just casually give them away. It's really unfair." Zhong Xiaohu said, "Martial Uncle He, you're joking. Even if I let you see this Heart Sutra, would you even read it?" He Tianshu didn't say anything and just chuckled. Then, Zhong Xiaohu said to Zhong Xiaohua with concern, "Xiaohua, I heard from Master that this reckless bull force is very easy. Anyone with a bit of understanding can learn it. Also, the Neigong Heart Sutra isn't complicated and the path of cultivation is also very simple. Normally, there won't be any danger of cultivation deviation. I remember that when you were learning fist techniques, you had a photographic memory when you read fist manuals. This thing shouldn't be too difficult for you." Photographic memory when I read fist manuals? He Tianshu was puzzled. Was he talking about Zhong Xiaohua? Zhong Xiaohu continued, "This Neigong Heart Sutra was specially chosen for you by Master, so it shouldn't be wrong. However, you haven't practiced any Neigong Heart Sutras before, so you have to be careful. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask Martial Uncle He." She turned her head and said to He Tianshu, "Please take care of my little brother in the future, Martial Uncle He." He Tianshu smiled and said, "There are so many people in the sect looking for you to form a group. Why do you need me?" Then, he said, "I've heard of this reckless bull force before. It's very easy to learn. I don't think I've heard of anyone suffering from cultivation deviation. However, Zhong Xiaohua, if you have any questions, you can ask me at any time, but I can't teach you this. After all, I'm not practicing the reckless bull force." Seeing that He Tianshu agreed, Zhong Xiaohu was very happy and thanked him repeatedly. Then, He Tianshu asked curiously, "Zhong Xiaohu, what Neigong Heart Sutra do you want to practice?" Zhong Xiaohu said awkwardly, "Martial Uncle He, you also know that I practiced Neigong for a period of time at the Lotus Escort Agency. Master said that the Neigong was too rough and wouldn't be good for the future. He told me to stop a long time ago. Luckily, the time I spent practicing it wasn't long, so it wouldn't affect the practice of new Neigong. He still hasn't decided what Neigong to teach me." He Tianshu was envious again and thought, "Your master just casually gave away Neigong Heart Sutras from other sects. How can the one you practice be fake? Maybe it's the ethereal divine art." However, how could he say this out loud? He only smiled and said, "That's a pity. You probably won't be able to participate in this year's martial arts exhibition." Martial arts exhibition? Zhong Xiaohua, who was immersed in the Neigong Heart Sutra, seemed to have heard something interesting and asked. Zhong Xiaohu smiled and said, "Martial Uncle He, you're joking again. I've just joined the sect. I haven't learned any fist techniques, Neigong, or sword techniques. How can I participate in this exhibition? Wouldn't that be embarrassing my master?" Zhong Xiaohua, who had originally wanted to read the Reckless Bull Force manual, immediately became interested. She threw the Neigong Heart Sutra that she couldn't get no matter how hard she tried in the past onto the stone table. She looked at the two people curiously and asked, "Hurry up and tell me, what is this martial arts exhibition?" The Brocade Disciple is divided into 5 levels and is also tested in the martial arts exhibition every year. However, the Brocade Disciple's cultivation is different from the commoner disciples. Every level of the commoner disciple's cultivation is the same, while the Brocade Disciple's cultivation is taught different cultivation techniques according to their aptitude. For example, if Zhong Xiaohu were to advance to the Brocade Disciple's level, He would have a unique interest or insight in fist techniques and may cultivate the ethereal sect's high-level fist techniques. Li Jinfeng nodded and said, "The ancients said that there is no limit to learning, but there is a limit to life. Only those who specialize in what they learn can have impressive achievements. The embroidered gown disciples of your esteemed sect probably specialize in one skill based on their own strengths." He Tianshu smiled and said, "It's better to study literature. When you open your mouth, you speak in a literary style and make sense. Perhaps this is the reason why the predecessors of my sect set these rules. However, there are still some differences between the examinations of the brocade disciples and the commoner disciples. Although the commoner disciples are tested through a martial arts competition, the winner will undoubtedly be promoted. However, if the loser has enough power and obtains the approval of the judge, they can also be promoted. Brocade disciples are the opposite. The standards are stricter. Even if they win the martial arts test, if they don't receive the judge's approval, they can't advance. Then, he said with a strange tone, "Also, there is no limit to the number of times a brocade disciple can take the test. As long as you don't pass the test, you have to keep taking the test until you pass. If you can't pass the test, you can't advance, no matter how many years you cultivate." At this time, He Tianshu felt that Zhong Xiaohua was staring at him. He asked curiously, "Zhong Xiaohua, why are you looking at me? Is there something on my face?" Zhong Xiaohua giggled and said, "I want to know what rank captain he is now." He Tianshu raised his eyebrows and said with a serious face, "Well, Zhong Xiaohua, what I just told you is common knowledge in the Misty School. Many people in the martial arts world know about it, so it's fine to say it. As for what rank I am, it involves the secrets of the Misty School. I can't casually reveal it to you. Don't ask too much about it, it's not good for your reputation." When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know much about the Misty School. She quickly said, "Okay, I understand. Captain He, please continue." He Tianshu said, "It's good that you understand. However, there's nothing else to say." Li Jinfeng asked, "Then, Captain He, can you tell us how to differentiate commoner disciples and brocade disciples? I seem to have heard that the gangs in the martial arts world use the color of their clothes to differentiate their status. They also use things like cuff logos to indicate their rank." When He Tianshu heard this, he snorted and said, "This method is extremely crude. I think the Misty School did this a long time ago, but it was abolished later." Zhong Xiaohua's curiosity was piqued. She quickly asked, "Why is that? Isn't this pretty good?" He Tianshu said, "First of all, think about it. The Misty School is such a big gang. How many disciples do we have, and what are their ranks? If every rank has to be marked with a different color of clothes, wouldn't the entire gang be colorful? What kind of prestigious sect is this? It's more like the Pear Garden. Moreover, if the cuff logos are marked, wouldn't it be special? This is too different from the standardization that the Misty School advocates. Actually, there's another point." He Tianshu pretended to be mysterious and said in a low voice, "In my opinion, if every piece of clothing is marked, the cost is too high. Although the gang is rich, many times, the landlord doesn't have any extra money. It's better to spend according to one's income. Martial power and financial resources are the two main factors for a gang's development. We can't waste money on trivial matters, right?" When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, she felt a little sympathetic. She clapped her hands and said, "Captain He, I agree with you. Money should be used where it's needed." The other two also understood. However, He Tianshu continued, "Moreover, if a person's strength can be seen from their clothes, then in the eyes of the Misty School, there will be a clear difference in status. It's not conducive to harmony and unity. It's also very easy to form small groups, which is not conducive to the competition and development of the disciples. The most important thing is, think about it. For the enemies of the Misty School, if they can see your strength from your clothes, then why would they spend so much effort looking for information? If you wear different clothes and have different logos on your clothes, then they can tell what your cultivation level is and how strong you are. They will naturally send people stronger than you to cause trouble for you. Won't you always be under their control, without any privacy. Everyone listened and nodded. He Tianshu said proudly, therefore, the ancestors of the Misty School were very wise to abolish this bad habit of clothing. Ordinary disciples' clothes are more or less the same. Zhong Xiaohua asked again, then, Captain He, when is this year's martial arts exhibition? He Tianshu said, probably a month later. This is a grand occasion for our Misty School. I'm really looking forward to it. Zhong Xiaohua took the opportunity to ask, Captain He, are you ready? He Tianshu smiled proudly and said, I wasn't confident at first, but I just learned ethereal steps. I have. Then, he realized something and said, this is a secret of the Misty School. It's not good to ask too much. Zhong Xiaohua smiled embarrassedly and said, then, when the time comes, can I come and take a look? He Tianshu smiled and said, Huanxi Villa is a branch of the Misty School. Usually, you can enter the Misty School with the villa's token. The security will be tight, but you should be able to enter. When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, she was very happy and asked again, then, can I participate in this martial arts exhibition? He Tianshu frowned and said, this martial arts exhibition is specially used to test the disciples of our Misty School. What are you doing? Oh, right. I heard that there were people from Huanxi Villa and Lotus Flower Escort Agency participating. It's been a long time, and I was still young at that time, so I vaguely remember it. However, there are no outsiders participating now. Zhong Xiaohua asked curiously, why is that? Then how can I participate? He Tianshu smiled and said, how would I know? If you want to participate, you can go back and ask Villa Lord Ou. Zhong Xiaohua asked with concern, Xiaohua, do you really want to participate? Do you only know that fist technique? You've never practiced internal energy? Zhong Xiaohua looked at her second brother and comforted him with a smile. Second brother, I'm just saying. I'm just here to watch the fun. Besides, my fist technique is not bad. Last time, I even taught a group of street ruffians a lesson. Everyone smiled bitterly. The newborn calf was not afraid of the tiger. This Zhong Xiaohua really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. However, if he didn't have this spirit, could he still be called a young man? Even if he was a young man from the countryside. The three of them chatted with Zhong Xiaohua for a while before they bid farewell and left. Zhong Xiaohua carefully hid the Reckless Bull Force manual in her bosom. Only then did she bid farewell to her second brother, who was still looking at her reluctantly when he walked her to the door. Although she had already started practicing the Carefree Heart Sutra, her talent was limited and she didn't make any progress. Moreover, this Reckless Bull Force manual was something that her second brother had painstakingly asked for from great swordsman Wen. It carried a strong sense of kinship with Zhong Xiaohua. There was no reason for Zhong Xiaohua not to cherish it. He Tianshu brought them to the decorated archway and didn't go out with them. He had some matters to attend to in the sect, so he naturally had to go to the pharmacy. Zhong Xiaohua and Li Jinfeng bid farewell to He Tianshu and went to the Gallop Carriage Company together. Li Jinfeng was a weak scholar, unlike Zhong Xiaohua who was full of energy and careful with money. Naturally, he took the carriage. By the time Zhong Xiaohua sent Li Jinfeng off and returned to Huanxi Mountain Villa, it was already noon. There wasn't a single person in the medicinal field. The Misty School's martial arts exhibition was just around the corner. This was a matter that concerned the future of the disciples. Even the captain, He Tianshu, was concerned about it, let alone Nai Xiao and the others. It was obvious that they spent less time in the medicinal field. Fortunately, the herbs in the medicinal field were still growing healthily. Other than weeding and other chores, it wasn't troublesome. Zhong Xiaohua didn't mind doing more work. Zhong Xiaohua went down to the medicinal field and cleaned it up in a short time. Then, she sat down on the ridge and carefully took out the Reckless Bull Force manual that Zhong Xiaohu gave her. This manual was called Reckless Bull Force and it was a very thin manual. No matter what, Zhong Xiaohua wasn't a beginner. After looking through it, she had a rough idea of what to do. This Reckless Bull Force was similar to the method that Zhong Xiaohu had told her before. The path of the internal energy in the body was also very simple. Compared to the first layer of the Carefree Heart Sutra, it was much worse. It was indeed the easiest internal energy cultivation method in the world of martial art. After reading the Reckless Bull Force manual, Zhong Xiaohua silently recited it in her heart and compared it with the manual. When she felt that there were no mistakes, she followed the manual's instructions and sat down cross-legged with her palms facing the sky. She closed her eyes and calmed her heart. Zhong Xiaohua had done this countless times before, so she was very familiar with it now. Zhong Xiaohua closed her eyes and imagined a warm current flowing into her forehead. Then, she swallowed it with her jade. She repeated this over and over again. Even when Zhong Xiaohua's forehead was covered in sweat and her heart was vexed, she still didn't feel any qi. For no reason, Zhong Xiaohua felt a wave of irritation. She really swallowed and opened her eyes. She looked at the healthy herbs in front of her and then looked at the barren medicinal field without sprouts. Zhong Xiaohua thought to herself, am I the seed that won't sprout? Do I not have a chance to shine? Zhong Xiaohua smiled wryly and mocked herself. Perhaps I really am stupid. Zhong Xiaohua raised his head and looked at the sky. There was still time before lunch, so she calmed herself down and sat down cross-legged again. She closed her eyes and continued the 9 shallow and 1 deep breathing. In the beginning, Zhong Xiaohua still hadn't shaken off the failure of the Reckless Bull Force, so he couldn't help but breathe quickly and find it difficult to walk. However, even if Zhong Xiaohua was stupid, he didn't lack tenacity. He had a heart that would only grow braver when faced with setbacks. Not long after, he gradually entered a strange state. His 9 shallow and 1 deep breathing gradually matched the frequency at night. Bit by bit, it moved Zhong Xiaohua's entire body. The pores on his body gradually opened. Naturally, Zhong Xiaohua used the method in the Heart Sutra to sense the yuan qi of the world outside. In the beginning, he didn't feel anything, but Zhong Xiaohua wasn't discouraged. Or it could be said that he didn't feel any joy or sorrow. His mind was calm and he didn't feel discouraged. He only knew that the outside world was endless emptiness. Only by searching endlessly could there be a result. After an unknown amount of time, Zhong Xiaohua suddenly sensed a trace of the yuan qi of the world that was similar to what was described in the Heart Sutra. He was delighted and was about to use his Heart Sutra to absorb it, but because his mind was distracted, he couldn't sense it anymore. Zhong Xiaohua opened his eyes, but there was a smile on his face. Even though he failed to absorb it for the first time, to Zhong Xiaohua who hadn't sensed the yuan qi of the world, it was a huge improvement. A milestone in progress. He, Zhong Xiaohua, finally had a sense of qi. Zhong Xiaohua was about to circulate his energy again, but when he saw the color of the sky, he couldn't help but be shocked. Ayo! He immediately jumped up from the ground. Noon had already passed, but he didn't know that there was still lunch to eat. Not long after, Zhong Xiaohua slowly walked back with a few buns in his hand and a bun in his mouth. Zhong Xiaohua's meal was still the same as before. He didn't have someone to send him off like Elder Yu, so naturally, no one would wait for him. That table of first-class food also turned cold and was taken away under the gazes of Ma Jing and the others. Waiting for Zhong Xiaohua were only a few cold buns. When Zhong Xiaohua found out that Nai Xiaoer and the others hadn't gone to eat, he couldn't help but be shocked. If he had gone earlier, wouldn't he have enjoyed an entire table of delicious food by himself? Zhong Xiaohua, who was currently filling his stomach, still hadn't forgotten the feeling he had just experienced. He couldn't resist the urge to try again, so he returned to the medicinal field while eating his buns. Sitting back down on the ridge, Zhong Xiaohua took a deep breath and calmed his emotions. The experience just now gave him a feeling that to draw qi into one's body, one must have a calm state of mind. It must be as calm as an ancient well to be able to succeed. After a while, Zhong Xiaohua felt that his surroundings were slowly calming down. He knew that it was time. Only then did he sit down in a cross-legged position and circulate the 9 shallow and 1 deep technique. Sure enough, this time, he smoothly entered a tranquil state. Thus, Zhong Xiaohua began to use the Heart Sutra again to sense the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the outside world. Not long after, Zhong Xiaohua had a new feeling. He felt that his consciousness was swimming around the outside world like a fish, as if it was looking for delicious food. Zhong Xiaohua liked this feeling very much. It was a kind of searching, a kind of freedom to soar. After an unknown amount of time, Zhong Xiaohua once again felt a trace of yuan qi of heaven and earth. This time, he didn't feel particularly happy, as if this was what he had expected. He followed the instructions of the Heart Sutra and his perception turned into a fish, guiding the yuan qi towards himself. That yuan qi was originally going downwards, but with the guidance of Zhong Xiaohua's consciousness, it immediately changed direction and slowly floated towards Zhong Xiaohua. When it came close, the yuan qi seemed to be attracted by something and quickly rushed into Zhong Xiaohua's body. It was unknown which pores it passed through, but Zhong Xiaohua didn't have such thoughts. He was still waiting for the yuan qi of heaven and earth to circulate in his body so that he could explore the mysteries of his inner force cultivation method. Unfortunately, when the yuan qi entered his body, it wasn't as described in the Heart Sutra. Zhong Xiaohua actually couldn't feel where it went. Chapter 159. After sensing his body for a while, Zhong Xiaohua could not help but want to cry. How could he bully people like this? It was fine if his aptitude was poor, but he could not sense the endless heaven and earth yuan qi in the world like what was mentioned in the Carefree Heart Sutra. He had worked so hard for such a long time and finally managed to draw the yuan qi into his body today. How could this trace of yuan qi suddenly disappear? It was a pity that Zhong Xiaohua did not have another pair of eyes in his body, so he naturally could not search for it. The only thing he could do was try again. With his first success, he could be considered to have accumulated experience. In the future, he would be familiar with sensing the yuan qi. Not long after, Zhong Xiaohua found another trace of yuan qi. It also came down, and with a pull from Zhong Xiaohua, it changed sides and fell into the embrace of Zhong Xiaohua. However, this door was as deep as the sea. After entering Zhong Xiaohua's body, it disappeared without a trace. After doing this a few times, Zhong Xiaohua no longer felt resentful. The heaven and earth yuan qi was outside his body and not his. As long as he drew the yuan qi into his body, then it was surnamed Zhong. Who cared where it was? As long as it did not run out, there would be a day when he would discover it. Moreover, the Carefree Heart Sutra did not mention how yuan qi came out. Looking at He Tianshu and the rest's cultivation, he had never heard of inner strength running out on its own. Could it be that it would be released by him? Speaking of which, it was strange. Zhong Xiaohua just sat cross-legged on the ridge of the medicinal field and drew a lot of heaven and earth yuan qi into his body in just one afternoon. At this time, Zhong Xiaohua was also a little puzzled. Although he had just started drawing yuan qi into his body, he could still draw yuan qi, right? Why couldn't he sense the yuan qi that filled the world? Why was it all strand by strand? And it all came down from above. It was not as the Carefree Heart Sutra said, that it was scattered between heaven and earth. Could it be that He Tianshu and the others' internal energy was cultivated from the outside like this? With a belly full of questions, Zhong Xiaohua returned to the small courtyard. Very naturally, he went to knock on He Tianshu's door. He Tianshu had already returned from the pharmacy and was studying ethereal steps in his room. When he saw Zhong Xiaohua enter the room, he smiled and asked, "Zhong Xiaohua, is there a problem with practicing reckless bull force?" Zhong Xiaohua was stunned and said, "Captain He, you're really a deity. You're really good at divination." He Tianshu waved his hand and said, "It's nothing. Although I was young back then, when I received my first internal energy cultivation method, I was just like you now. I was in a hurry to cultivate and accidentally made a mistake. If it weren't for my senior and junior brothers discovering it early, I would have been crippled. I've heard of your reckless bull force before. It's easy to understand, and the circulation path is simple. It's suitable for people like you who have patience and don't have anyone guiding them." Then, he raised his eyebrows and giggled, "Have you been busy all afternoon? How's your practice of reckless bull force?" Zhong Xiaohua blushed and said in a small voice, "I don't feel anything. I still can't feel the qi." He Tianshu laughed and said, "It's okay. The feeling of qi is related to each person's talent. You can't be discouraged and try more. Maybe you'll be able to feel it soon. Back then, I also used 2 whole days to feel the qi. How long does the fastest method take?" Zhong Xiaohua was curious. "Immediately," He Tianshu answered without hesitation. "Ah!" Zhong Xiaohua's mouth opened so wide that a duck egg could be stuffed in. "That's right. Immediately." He Tianshu smiled and replied, "There are countless geniuses in this world. From what I remember back then, very few people can immediately feel the qi. Of course, most people can only feel it after 1 or 2 days." Zhong Xiaohua continued to ask, "Then, Captain He, is there anyone who can't feel the qi?" He Tianshu frowned and said, "I don't remember anyone like that. It's still the same old saying. The people that I picked out from Misty School are all talented and intelligent people. Very few of them can feel the qi after 3 or 4 days." Zhong Xiaohua's heart sank. She then asked, "Then, Captain He, do you feel the qi from the outside world in wisps or lumps?" When He Tianshu heard this, he was stunned. He then laughed and said, Zhong Xiaohua, you really know how to joke. There's no real qi in the outside world. The feeling of qi is just a hypothesis. I believe that the reckless bull force also has the meaning of a hypothesis. Pretend that there's qi flowing into your body from your forehead. That's the embryonic form of internal strength. Internal strength, you have to move the qi yourself to open up the acupuncture points in your body and circulate it in your meridians. Every time it circulates, it will increase a little. This is the essence of increasing internal strength. Of course, there are also some medicine that can increase internal strength. But I've never heard of being able to absorb qi from outside the body. If that's the case, we can just absorb qi from outside the body every day. Why do we have to sit cross-legged and cultivate our internal strength? When he saw Zhong Xiaohua's puzzled face, He Tianshu explained, "Also, the meridians in the human body are the containers for internal strength. The size of the container determines the amount of internal strength. We cultivate internal strength for 2 reasons. On one hand, we need to increase our internal strength. On the other hand, we need to expand our meridians. Only when both are increased can it be considered a high-level internal strength cultivation method. Although your reckless bull force is easy to learn, the circulation path is very simple. Every time you circulate it, the increase in your internal strength is limited. Also, this cultivation method has very little effect on expanding your meridians. That's why there are very few people who suffer from qi deviation. But, Zhong Xiaohua was a little anxious and said, "I can't feel internal strength from outside the body. Then how can I generate internal strength in my body?" He Tianshu smiled and said, "The appearance is born from the heart. The generation of internal strength is like this. As long as you have a sense of qi, the meridians in your body will naturally generate internal strength. It will be warm, and if you circulate it according to the cultivation method, the internal strength will follow your thoughts and flow in your meridians like a little mouse. If you cultivate for a long time, the mouse will naturally grow." He Tianshu added on as if it was a matter of fact. "Warm flow. Flow in my meridians." Zhong Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. In the past, when she cultivated the Big Dipper fist, there was a warm flow. She guessed that was internal strength. However, as for the meridians, Zhong Xiaohua thought about the cultivation method in the Carefree Heart Sutra. It didn't seem to be the same as the warm flow. So she asked again, "Captain He, then is the movement of internal strength in the meridians the same?" He Tianshu smiled and said, "Of course it's not the same. The difference in every cultivation method is in the use of the meridians and the movement of internal strength. If the ethereal divine art is the same as your reckless bull strength, then can it still be called the ethereal divine art?" Zhong Xiaohua suddenly understood. However, she still didn't give up and asked, "Captain He, is what you said true? Internal strength can't be absorbed from the outside world?" He Tianshu said resolutely and decisively, "Definitely, definitely, definitely." Zhong Xiaohua was speechless. When she cultivated the Carefree Heart Sutra, she really felt the yuan qi of heaven and earth. She also guided it into her body. What was going on? She originally wanted to ask He Tianshu about the disappearance of the yuan qi in her body. Now that she had completely overturned her question about the feeling of qi, she might as well not ask. He Tianshu saw Zhong Xiaohua's discouraged appearance and went forward to pat him on the shoulder, saying, "Zhong Xiaohua, failure is the mother of success. You have to be unafraid of hardship, sacrifice, and sweat. If you can't get the feeling of qi in a day, then use 2 days. If 2 days aren't enough, then use 3 days. If you really can't get it after 1 or 2 months, then it's fine. We don't cultivate inner strength cultivation methods and change to outer strength cultivation methods. Look at our Misty School's stone cow, they don't cultivate inner strength cultivation methods, but aren't they still very powerful?" Zhong Xiaohua didn't make any excuses and casually looked at He Tianshu's table. He Tianshu looked at his appearance and said awkwardly, "The second layer of the ethereal steps is still a bit difficult. I've looked at it, but I still don't understand it. You say, it's clearly a footwork technique, but there are some parts that I don't understand. It's simply inconceivable. I really don't know how Big Sect Leader and the others managed to cultivate it. Don't be anxious. Once I understand it, I'll immediately tell you. You should first learn your reckless bull strength and find the feeling of qi." Zhong Xiaohua also lost interest and said, "Okay, team leader He. You look at it first. I'll go back and think about it." After saying this, Zhong Xiaohua lowered his head and walked out. Suddenly, Zhong Xiaohua's eyes lit up. He had just read the first level of the Carefree Heart Sutra. It might not be recorded, but it couldn't be that there were no records of the cultivation technique after that. So he hurriedly opened the Carefree Heart Sutra again. But what made Zhong Xiaohua disappointed was that after he carefully read from beginning to end, he still couldn't find any answers from this secret manual. The other 10 levels of the cultivation technique also talked about the path of cultivation and the description of realms. It seemed that only the first level slightly touched on the yuan qi of heaven and earth. However, Zhong Xiaohua wasn't without any gains. At the end of the Carefree Heart Sutra, it talked about another method of absorbing the yuan qi of heaven and earth. This method wasn't used to absorb the yuan qi of heaven and earth in a gaseous state, but a solid yuan qi of heaven and earth called a yuan stone. According to the records of the Carefree Heart Sutra, although the yuan qi of heaven and earth permeated the entire world, but the density of the yuan qi in different places was different. In some special places, the yuan qi of heaven and earth was shockingly dense. After a long time, it would condense into a yuan stone. According to the time it took to form the yuan stone also came in different sizes. The small ones were like broad beans, while the large ones were like walnuts. These yuan stones were the crystallization of the yuan qi and naturally contained a lot of yuan qi. It could be absorbed by the cultivator for a long time. After the yuan stone was absorbed, it would slowly shrink until it completely disappeared. Zhong Xiaohua was very happy and immediately committed this method to memory. However, the last sentence of the method poured cold water on his head. This method could only be used after the cultivation of the Carefree Heart Sutra to the 9th level. Otherwise, large amounts of yuan qi of heaven and earth would surge into the cultivator's body and cause the cultivator's weak meridians to explode, causing the cultivator to explode and die. Zhong Xiaohua pursed his lips and put the Carefree Heart Sutra back into his clothes. He thought to himself that it was indeed useless again. Not to mention what the yuan stone looked like and where he could find it. Just looking at the current situation, he hadn't even entered the first level. Who knew when he would be able to cultivate to the 9th level? Even if he had the yuan stone, he wouldn't dare to absorb it. At night, Zhong Xiaohua went to the forest as usual. First, he practiced his fist techniques, then his sword techniques and his qinggong. Needless to say, there was no need to talk about his fist technique and sword technique. His qinggong was also becoming more and more proficient. Although he did not have internal energy as a foundation, Zhong Xiaohua's current figure was also very different from before. He used his movement technique to run in the forest, and it actually looked like he was using qigong. However, he could not run high, so it was a waste of his elegant spirit. After doing his homework, Zhong Xiaohua picked a spot under a tree and sat down cross-legged confidently. He circulated the inner strength of the Carefree Heart Sutra and prepared to sense the Yuan Qi in the outside world and draw it into his body. However, after meditating for a long time, Zhong Xiaohua's senses also roamed outside for a long time, but he still couldn't find any Yuan Qi. Even the trace of Yuan Qi that he had felt in the afternoon was nowhere to be found. Helpless, Zhong Xiaohua stood up again and patted the dust off his body. What was going on? Could it be that there was no Yuan Qi at night? Zhong Xiaohua was depressed. He was just practicing the Carefree Heart Sutra. Why was there so much trouble? It was either something was wrong here or there. It wasn't easy to find the Yuan Qi, but it disappeared in the afternoon. Where was he going to find it? Actually, he didn't think about it. In this world, learning and cultivation was best if there was someone to guide you. Although the secret manual was the essence of the theory, it recorded other people's experiences. Everyone was different, and there would definitely be differences in cultivation. These differences needed practical experience to make up for. Otherwise, why would it be said that great teachers produce great disciples? Although there were self-taught talents, they were just a drop in the ocean. However, the idea of where should I find the missing Yuan Qi reminded Zhong Xiaohua. Didn't he feel the Yuan Qi for the first time in the medicinal field at noon? Since he couldn't find it in the forest at night, he might as well try the medicinal field. Since there was still some time before midnight, he wasn't afraid that he wouldn't be able to make it back. Under the moonlight, the medicinal field was exceptionally quiet. If there wasn't a gentle breeze, the herbs swaying in the wind could be seen clearly under the moonlight. It was a wonderful night, but he did not know how lucky Zhong Xiaohua was. Zhong Xiaohua first sat on the ridge of the field, and didn't immediately practice 9 shallow and 1 deep. This was progress. The secret manual didn't say that one needed to calm down before practicing. Without the guidance of a master, one could only gain this experience through trial and error. When Zhong Xiaohua felt that he was ready, he then used the breathing method of the Carefree Heart Sutra to slowly adjust his breathing frequency and gradually enter the state of emptiness. When Zhong Xiaohua released his perception, he couldn't help but be shocked. He almost lost his mind and lost his state of mind. Why? As soon as Zhong Xiaohua released his fish-like perception, he discovered that there was a lot of Yuan Qi of heaven and earth outside. Wisps of Yuan Qi fell from the sky like rain, more than 5 times more than during the day. Although it was very different from the description in the Carefree Heart Sutra, it was still a lot more than before. Zhong Xiaohua happily used the method of the Heart Sutra to guide the Yuan Qi of heaven and earth. Strangely enough, as soon as Zhong Xiaohua guided the first wisp of Yuan Qi into his body, the other Yuan Qi seemed to have heard the bugle horn and all rushed to him. Zhong Xiaohua suddenly understood. Previously, he thought that the guiding of Yuan Qi was like guiding wisps of Yuan Qi in the daytime. That would take too long to cultivate one's inner strength. Now that he looked at it, under the condition of abundant Yuan Qi, as long as he guided the first wisp of Yuan Qi, the other wisps of Yuan Qi would follow. This was the real trick. It seemed that he didn't take the wrong path. At this time, Zhong Xiaohua was extremely happy. The 100,000 pores on his body were like babies with mouths, competing to suck in the limited amount of Yuan Qi of heaven and earth. The Yuan Qi also seemed to be endless. It was just that the amount was very small each time, but the advantage was that it was endless. Thus, Zhong Xiaohua, who was overjoyed, completely forgot about time in this unexpected state. How could he still know what time it was? There seemed to be a faint smile on his face that was devoid of joy or sorrow. Just as that smile appeared, it immediately froze on his face. The pitiful Zhong Xiaohua immediately fell into a dream that a certain senior from the Misty School would be extremely envious of. In his dream, Zhong Xiaohua was still sitting cross-legged. The special breathing method was still the same, and the gurgling stream of Yuan Qi was still flowing into his body. Only, that flickering in his dream, under the stimulation of the 9 shallow and 1 deep, was once again deeply magnified. An invisible frequency was emitted from Zhong Xiaohua's body, coinciding with the stars in the night sky. Chapter 160. Just as the twinkle in Zhong Xiaohua's dream resonated with the stars in the night sky, the endless starry sky seemed to have received a call and instantly swarmed over, as if passing through time and space. Not long after, Zhong Xiaohua's body was surrounded by countless amounts of star power. The 100,000 pores all over his body that were crying for food opened up as if they had seen a delicacy and tasted it to their heart's content. After the star power and yuan qi were absorbed into the body by the pores, they were so small that they could not be sensed. In his dream, Zhong Xiaohua unconsciously circulated the first level of the Carefree Heart Sutra, pushing them to flow in the meridians according to the circulation route. Just like before, the astral energy was slowly refined into pure yuan qi, and the yuan qi absorbed along with it fused with the yuan qi formed by the astral energy and was refined by the twinkle, leaving behind an even purer yuan qi. This pure yuan qi was stored in Zhong Xiaohua's middle dantian. However, even though there was a lot of astral energy and yuan qi entering Zhong Xiaohua's body, Zhong Xiaohua's meridians were purified to a shocking degree under the effect of the twinkle. 10 holts were gone, and in the end, only a tiny bit of yuan qi was left. However, the purity of that yuan qi was terrifying. Everything was carried out quietly without Zhong Xiaohua's awareness. However, the pure yuan qi was too little, so little that Zhong Xiaohua was unable to sense it. Until the next morning, when the sun rose, Zhong Xiaohua opened his eyes and shook off his clothes that were soaked with dew. However, he still did not know what he had gained from his busy night. Zhong Xiaohua looked around and remembered what happened yesterday. He could not help but smile bitterly and stand up to stretch a little. Although he had meditated through the night, his body did not feel any discomfort. In fact, he felt refreshed and not sleepy at all. He was even more energetic than when he was lying on the Kang bed. Zhong Xiaohua could not help but think to himself, why not sleep in the future and sell the Kang bed in the hut for money so that he could meditate every day? It was still early and the sun had just peeked out from the horizon. Zhong Xiaohua swallowed at the rising sun and another warm current entered his body. Suddenly, Zhong Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something, but he could not figure it out clearly. He tilted his head and thought for a while, but still could not figure it out, so he threw it to the back of his mind. Zhong Xiaohua wanted to practice the Fist of the North Star by the herb field, but unfortunately, there were no trees around the herb field. Zhong Xiaohua had always avoided people when practicing his fist, and now that he was suddenly practicing in an open area, he was not used to it, was a little uncomfortable. Thus, he decided to return to the forest to practice his fist and sword arts. But just as he walked to the edge of the forest, he thought of another matter. His fist art would have to be seen by others sooner or later. Not to mention that he only knew this fist art, regardless of whether it was in front of others or behind others, his fist art was still the Fist of the North Star. Although it was made up of different fist arts, it was still a fist art. In the future, there was no need to avoid people. Besides, he still wanted to participate in the Misty School's martial arts exhibition. If he did not use the Fist of the North Star, what else could he use? He might as well practice his fist art openly and not care about what others said. As for Elder Yu's sword art, he was instructed not to let others see it when he was teaching it. Thus, he could only avoid people when he practiced his sword art. Just as he was thinking, Zhong Xiaohua walked into the forest. Suddenly, he heard a pa-da sound. It was the sound of a person falling down. Zhong Xiaohua was shocked. It was broad daylight. Could it be that someone was doing something bad in the forest? Immediately, Zhong Xiaohua executed the ethereal steps and quickly walked into the depths of the forest. Who knew that just as Zhong Xiaohua took a few steps, he heard the sound coming from the depths of the forest. A series of curses was heard, XXX, why is the ethereal step so difficult? This footwork is obviously wrong. That voice was very familiar. It was Zhong Xiaohua's cheap master, He Tianshu. Zhong Xiaohua couldn't help but be delighted. Captain He, why are you up so early? When Zhong Xiaohua arrived at the scene, He Tianshu had just climbed up from the ground and was patting the dust off his body. With an awkward expression, he said, Zhong Xiaohua? Why are you here? Why didn't I hear your footsteps? Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, I usually practice my fist art in the forest. Just now, I heard a strange sound, so I came over to take a look. Perhaps Captain He was too focused on practicing and didn't hear my footsteps. He Tianshu raised his eyebrows. Strange sound? Ian, I also heard it just now. It seems like a little bird kicked the tree branch and broke it. Don't bother about it. Zhong Xiaohua found it funny and said, Ian, I think so. But, why is Captain He up so early today? He Tianshu took out a few pieces of paper from his bosom and casually waved it around, saying, Isn't this the Ethereal Steps manual? After you left yesterday, I took a careful look at it, but I still couldn't figure out how to use this footwork. I didn't even sleep well, so I came here to practice before dawn. However, this footwork is just as I thought. There are many places that I can't use. I don't know if these are written wrongly. Not only did Zhong Xiaohua not believe his words, even He Tianshu himself didn't sound very confident. Perhaps he was trying to find an excuse for the little bird that broke the tree branch. This very natural change made He Tianshu, who wanted to see Zhong Xiaohua make a fool of herself, drop his eyeballs to the ground. What was going on? He Tianshu walked forward excitedly and asked, Zhong Xiaohua, have you seen this footwork before? Zhong Xiaohua stood there in a daze. She didn't understand and said, Captain He, of course I haven't seen it before. I don't understand it. He Tianshu took out a few thin pieces of paper and pointed to a spot on it. He said, Since you haven't seen it before, how did you execute this footwork so accurately? This last step is actually exactly the same as what was written in the secret manual. I tried this position and angle a few times just now, but I didn't succeed. I was so tired that I even fell to the ground. At this point, He Tianshu didn't care about his face anymore and spilled everything out. Zhong Xiaohua frowned and said, How would I know? I only executed it according to the footwork you taught me. He Tianshu didn't believe her and said, Zhong Xiaohua, can you execute it again? Zhong Xiaohua recalled in her mind and said, I'll try. I should be able to. After saying that, she followed her memory and combined it with He Tianshu's impression. She executed it step by step. Although Zhong Xiaohua hadn't executed the difficult part just now, He Tianshu had already executed it. He Tianshu was deeply aware of the complexity of the ethereal steps. It was only after a few days of seclusion that he was able to gain a rough understanding of the ethereal steps. Previously, he had only been able to execute it fluently because of the secret manual. It seemed like this was the first time Zhong Xiaohua had seen him execute the ethereal steps. He had only seen it a few times and he had already mastered it so perfectly. This seemed to be very different from his impression of the clumsy Zhong Xiaohua who learned fist techniques. However, the final result was another blow to He Tianshu's self-confidence. Zhong Xiaohua actually executed the difficult part perfectly. She turned around beautifully and stopped in her tracks. She smiled and asked, Captain He, do you think it should be executed like this? He Tianshu stuttered and said in disbelief, Yes, it's like this. Immediately, he threw Zhong Xiaohua aside and practiced it again in disbelief. Unfortunately, he still stopped at the difficult part and almost fell. He Tianshu was puzzled. Why couldn't he do it well? Why did this Zhong Xiaohua succeed in one try? Hence, He Tianshu walked to Zhong Xiaohua's side and rubbed his hands. He asked, Zhong Xiaohua, how did you do it just now? How did you manage to take that step so easily? I see that you slide quite beautifully. You really have my style. Can you tell me how you control your body when you're about to fall? Zhong Xiaohua tilted her head and thought for a while. She said, Captain He, I don't know exactly how I did it. However, I didn't control my body. I just extended my leg naturally. That sliding step was also done casually. I felt that it was very suitable for my body. He Tianshu was puzzled. He said, "Your body is already crooked. How can you not control it? You just let yourself fall?" Zhong Xiaohua nodded. "Yes, that's it." He Tianshu thought for a while and said, "I know. As long as you let nature take its course, your left foot will definitely let your right foot pass. Do the sliding step." Zhong Xiaohua couldn't explain it, so she said, "I think so. Anyway, I didn't do anything." He Tianshu nodded and began to practice again. However, he was even more miserable this time. His body fell to the ground, hard and fast. He Tianshu jumped up from the ground and shouted in exasperation, "Didn't you say that you didn't do anything? Why can't you fall?" Zhong Xiaohua scratched her head and said, "Maybe it's a problem of character. When I came back from Ethereal Heights yesterday, I helped an old woman cross the road. How could He Tianshu believe this? He gestured and said, "First, I put my left foot here, then my right foot here. My body is crooked. Since you said to follow my body, I naturally used my strength to walk here. Then, my body was still crooked. The more I tried to use strength, the more crooked my body was. What's going on?" Seeing He Tianshu muttering like a devil, Zhong Xiaohua was very puzzled. She asked, "Captain He, why do you need to use your strength to step forward? What strength are you using?" He Tianshu was a little impatient. He said, "Of course it's internal strength. Without internal strength, how can your steps be fast and elegant?" Zhong Xiaohua pouted. "Captain He, when did I have internal strength? I haven't found my sense of qi yet." He Tianshu heard this and his expression changed. He slapped his forehead and seemed to understand. His cheap disciple didn't have any internal strength at all. How could she use her strength to her feet? After finding out the reason, He Tianshu couldn't wait to practice again. Sure enough, this time, he was successful. He Tianshu was not only happy, but also had a strange feeling. This footwork actually rejected internal strength. Sigh. He Tianshu sighed. He didn't know what he was thinking about. Then, he raised his feet and prepared to walk away. Zhong Xiaohua quickly caught up and asked, "Captain He, are we not practicing anymore? It's still early. Breakfast isn't ready yet." He Tianshu said curiously, "I've been studying it for a long time, but this is all I know. How can I continue practicing? Why don't I give you this secret manual and you can practice it first?" After saying this, he acted as if he was going to take something out. When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, she quickly waved her hand. What a joke! She had just looked at it and saw that it was full of small feet. Looking at it gave her a headache. She knew very well how difficult it was to be self-taught. Since someone was willing to teach her, why should she take the unorthodox path? Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "I'm just worried about Captain His body. It's still early for breakfast, so why don't you practice? As the saying goes, work is for the villa, but the body is for the individual. You must take care of your body. Please add it to your collection, thank you." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.